Chapter 33. Hey, what do you want? I saw her first. The balding man took a step forward. When he saw that there were several people behind Xiaoqing, he was terrified. However, his lust overcame everything. He straightened his neck and said, "What? Are you going to be unreasonable?" Xiaoqing didn't even look at him. She just looked at the stall owner and said, £30. This girl is mine. The stall owner laughed and said, "Why do you want to buy a girl?" Xiaoqing's eyes were very cold. Do you need me to say it again? The stall owner swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He had seen many powerful superpower people, and had also met the higher-ups of the base, but he had never seen anyone like Xiaoqing. One look from her was enough to make him feel a chill down his spine. The stall owner had a premonition that if he dared to say another word, this ice-cold woman in front of him would really kill him. No need. £30. Wait, I negotiated the price with you first. The balding man said anxiously. He liked young girls. The younger they were, the more excited he was. Before the apocalypse, although he liked young girls, he could only secretly fantasize because of the law. He didn't dare to do anything. At most, he would call some underage girls. At the end of the world, the law had become a pile of waste paper. Especially when he had a supernatural ability, some of the things that he didn't dare to do had been satisfied, which made him overflow with excitement. What he liked to do the most was to buy or force young girls who looked like what he wanted to satisfy his unspeakable fetish. This girl was simply the best. She suited his taste too well. Asking him to give up was like cutting off his flesh. Xiaoqing and the others were going to trade, so they brought a lot of things including food. Xiaoqing took the food and gave it to the stall owner. Then, she took the girl's hand and said, "We're even." Stop. I saw her first. The Mediterranean man was both anxious and angry. He was anxious because Xiaoqing intervened and took the girl away. He was angry because Xiaoqing ignored him the whole time. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. It was Gu Panpan who made a move. She used her special ability in an instant and possessed King Kong Barbie. Xiaoqing could clearly see that Gu Panpan's shirt was almost torn apart. The shape of his muscles was clearly outlined on his tight clothes. It was simply so strange that it made people speechless. Gu Panpan's fist landed on the defenseless Mediterranean man's head, causing him to fall backwards. Blood flowed out of his nose. Gu Panpan then grabbed one of his legs and threw him to the ground, causing him to fall apart. When he was about to faint, Gu Panpan stretched his neck and returned to his normal size. Motherfucker, I've been wanting to do it for a long time. What the hell is this? Let's go. Xiaoqing held the little girl's hand. She flicked her finger slightly and a small seed fell on the balding man. Gu Chuan, who was about to move his finger, glanced at Xiaoqing and let go of his hand. This time there was a big grudge. There was a saying, if you don't remove the roots when you cut the weeds, they'll grow again when the spring breeze blows. How could Xiaoqing leave an unstable factor that might bring danger to them? Because of the little girl, they didn't buy anything else. Instead, they returned to their temporary residence. As soon as they returned, Gu Panpan couldn't help but ask, "Although I sympathize with her, Sister Qing, is it really okay for us to bring her along? This journey is too dangerous. We can't even guarantee that we can survive." Xiaoqing let the timid little girl sit beside her and said indifferently, "I'd rather she die in the mouth of zombies than die in the hands of a wretched old man." Xiaoqing rubbed the little girl's head. There was a trace of tenderness in her eyes. "It doesn't matter how she dies. At least she has some dignity. This is the only way I can help her. If we can safely return to the base, we can settle her down there. I can still afford to raise an underage girl." Gu Panpan pursed her lips. It was hard to tell whether she was sad or sad. Xiaoqing was right. In this post-apocalyptic world, they couldn't even protect themselves. How could they help her? They could only try their best to live while they were alive. When they died, they had to die with dignity. That was all. The little girl probably had some problems with her IQ, but she was very dependent on Xiaoqing. She seemed to know that although Xiaoqing looked cold, she was someone who was really good to her. "What's your name?" Xiaoqing rubbed the little girl's head and asked softly. The little girl blinked her eyes blankly. Finally, she murmured in a weak voice, I'm just a loser." Xiaoqing's eyes became colder. She looked at the little girl's big and dull eyes and said, "Call yourself Xiao Tong." Take my surname, okay? The girl, oh no, she should be called Xiao Tong. She nodded and grabbed the corner of Xiao Qing's clothes nervously. Xiao Qing could tell that she was slower than the average person, but she was not mentally retarded. Her brain must have been seriously injured, and one of her nerves was injured, causing her to be slow. She fiddled with Xiao Tong's hair and found that there was an ugly scar. Judging from the shape of the scar, it seemed to be caused by knocking on the corner of a table. It went without saying how the scar came about. In fact, it was a very unwise choice to bring Xiao Tong with them. This was probably the only mercy that Xiao Qing had. She thought that she was a heartless person, but her blood was still boiling. Let's walk around in a while and then leave this place early. Xiao Qing didn't like this base. She didn't like it from the bottom of her heart. No, Sister Qing. Gu Ponpon's face was a little ugly. It's going to be a full moon soon. We can't stay in the wild. Full moon? Xiao Qing was stunned. Was there anything special about a full moon? Every time there's a full moon, the zombies will be especially fanatical. Their aggression and five senses will all be heightened. It's even possible for them to form a zombie tide that besieges the base. Moreover, when there's a full moon, it's the peak time for zombies to evolve. There will also be more mutated zombies. Gu Panpan hurriedly explained. So no matter what, we have to stay in the base. Is that so? Xiao Qing hadn't encountered a full moon before. This was the first full moon she encountered after climbing out of the hospital freezer. Xiao Qing couldn't help but think, if the zombies will mutate during the full moon, then what about Air Dai? Would there be anything strange with Air Dai? What about her and little Baozi? Will something happen to them too? No matter what would happen, she had to be prepared in advance. Especially her, little Baozi, and Air Dai's identities couldn't be exposed. Gu Panpan and the others could feel at ease to team up with a psychic, but they wouldn't feel at ease to team up with zombies, even if they had experienced a lot. Xiao Qing narrowed her eyes. She hoped that during the full moon, there wouldn't be any strange changes. When she took out the small floral dress, Xiao Tong's bright eyes were even more burning. Every girl would dream of being a princess. Even a tomboy would probably have yearned for small floral patterns and tutu dresses. As for Xiao Tong, the best clothes she had ever worn since she was young were made from her mother's old dresses. She had also yearned for new clothes, but all she got in return was scolding and beating. Is it suitable to wear it? Xiao Qing unfolded the dress. Xiao Tong touched it carefully, but her eyes couldn't help secretly looking at Xiao Qing. It's for you. Wear it. Xiao Qing couldn't help softening her voice and whispering. Xiao Tong dared to take off her old clothes for a long time. Xiao Qing's eyes immediately widened. She saw that there was no skin without scars on Xiao Tong's body. The old scars were all over her thin and white body, from her back to her chest, from her arms to her legs. It was a shocking sight. Xiao Tong happily changed into a pink t-shirt and a suspender skirt. Xiao Qing asked her to sit down, untied her long hair, and braided it into 2 braids. Chapter 35. Xiao Tong looked very beautiful with joy in her eyes and face. Xiao Qing touched her head gently, feeling sad in her heart. You look like a little princess. She could imagine how hard Xiao Tong's childhood was. Xiao Tong was just like her in the orphanage. She fought for a piece of dessert and a bowl of porridge. As for Xiao Tong, she probably didn't even have the chance to fight back. She was treated as a toy, an object to be bought and sold. Her whole life was full of sorrow. Xiao Tong lifted the hem of her dress and twirled in front of Xiao Qing. She was as happy as a little butterfly. After twirling, she realized what she was doing. She didn't want to look at her clothes and wanted to change into the old ones. All her feelings were written on her face. Xiao Qing couldn't help but throw the old clothes away. Don't be afraid of getting them dirty. I'll buy you new ones. Wear them. They look good. I like them very much. Xiao Tong was happy again. She was too easy to be satisfied. When Xiao Qing took Xiao Tong out, Yan Hanqing was already cooking. Air Dai was holding Xiao Bao on the sofa. Xiao Bao kept trying to climb out of Air Dai's arms to grab the raisins on the table. The green raisins still had water drops on them. They looked fresh and delicious. There were a few red apples beside them, but the skin was a little withered. Gu Panpan was cutting the apples into pieces with her new knife. and then putting them on the plate to make a beautiful pattern. In short, the atmosphere in the living room was very good. It didn't look like they were going to have a full moon, which was called the blood moon. The reason why the full moon was called the blood moon was that several small bases had been attacked by zombies during the full moon. The whole bases were slaughtered. 2 days later, a base came to investigate. They found that in the base, apart from zombies, there were only corpses with broken limbs and bones left. So gradually, the full moon was called the blood moon. The base that Xiaoqing and the others were currently in was not considered a large base. The entire base only had about 1,000 people, which was about the size of a medium-sized village. The only good thing was that the base was far away from the dense zombies in the cities and towns. Therefore, even if the blood moon zombies attacked, not too many zombies would approach the base. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. The upper echelons of the base didn't have much to worry about. They had already ordered the base members to reinforce the walls. When Xiaoqing and the others returned from shopping, they saw many members of the base carrying barbed wire fences. They had added another line of defense outside the base. Yan Hanqing made 4 dishes and a soup. His culinary skills were very good, and the few of them ate happily. After the meal, the group ate fruits and chatted while waiting for the arrival of the blood moon. The sky was gloomy both during the day and at night. When the round moon rose, its edges seemed to be dyed red by the strange color of the haze. No wonder it was called the blood moon. The howling of zombies was faintly heard from afar. Xiaoqing sat on the sofa with the little bun between her legs. When the moon rose, Xiaoqing felt that the blood in her body was boiling. However, it was not boiling too much. It was still tolerable. The little bun was rubbing against her legs. It seemed that he was also affected. Dai was the one who was affected the most. He lowered his head and curled into a ball on the sofa. He was very silent. Occasionally, his back would tremble slightly. Xiaoqing looked at the time. It was only 9 o'clock in the evening. She could not help but say, Dai is not feeling well. I will take him back to his room. Remember to call me if you need anything. She carried the little bun on her back and carried Dai in a princess carry. Xiaotong wanted to follow, but Gu Panpan stopped her. Gu Panpan stuffed a piece of apple into Xiaotong's hand. She did not want Xiaotong to disturb Xiaoqing. When Xiaoqing carried Dai, she saw Dai hiding in the cloak. His face became paler, and his dark eyes seemed to be dyed red by the blood moon. Dai curled up in Xiaoqing's arms. A pair of small canine teeth peeked out of his upper lip. Dai's fangs were different from the zombie's fangs. He only had 2 small canine fangs. He did not look scary at all. Instead, he looked cute. After Xiaoqing brought Dai into the room, Dai seemed to be relieved. He could not help but squeeze himself into Xiaoqing's arms again. His skin already had a strange temperature. Logically speaking, zombies were already a kind of corpse, so their bodies were cold and had no temperature. Dai was the same in normal times, but at this moment, Dai's skin began to heat up slowly. More importantly, Xiaoqing heard the sound of blood boiling from Dai's body. She did not know if it was the sound of his blood boiling or the sound of his pulse beating. She once again realized that zombies might be more and more like humans in the future as they evolved, from their IQ to their appearance. Then, sooner or later, she, Little Bun, and Dai would become no different from normal humans. While she was thinking, Dai suddenly rolled out of her arms. His sharp nails grew out and almost pierced a hole in the bed. Chapter 36. Dai, who had rolled to the ground, was in a very strange state. His pale skin was turning pink at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, and then it was turning dark red. What was even scarier was that Dai's veins were slowly emerging from under his skin. Through the layer of skin, his dark green veins could be seen clearly. They were pulsing slowly and heavily, like squirming earthworms. Xiaoqing could feel a wave of energy spreading from Dai's head to his entire body. The wave of energy gave Xiaoqing a feeling like a delicious delicacy, with an indescribable temptation. This made Xiaoqing have an impulse to stretch out her fingers, pry open his skull, dig out the shiny crystal inside, and swallow it. Fortunately, Xiaoqing's willpower had always been strong, so she was less affected by the full moon than Dai. Little Bun, on the other hand, was similar to Dai. He had already curled up into a ball at the corner of the bed. Slowly, Xiaoqing saw that Dumbo's fingernails turned from black-gray to more than 10 centimeters long to sharp and slender, like the color of ink. Air dye bent his fingers, and they easily pierced through the bedding and the bed frame as if they were tofu. The redness in his eyes became more and more intense. Air dye weakly curled himself up like a shrimp, and his exposed skin turned crimson. Even the lines formed by the ferocious veins looked like dark green tattoos. Combined with Air dye's loose clothes due to his constant struggle, he looked very sexy. Xiaoqing patted her own head. She was probably stupid from the fever. How could she find a zombie sexy? She even had the urge to bite Air dye's neck. After about an hour, Air dye stopped for a short while. Xiaoqing let out a sigh of relief. She looked at Little Bun and then at Air dye. Her worried heart slowly relaxed. Before she could relax, Gu Panpan knocked on the door. Sister Qing. The zombies are attacking the city. Xiaoqing frowned. She touched Air dye's hair and whispered, "Help me look after my son. I'll be back soon." Then Xiaoqing pulled the door open and left. She didn't know that the moment she left, Air dye fell into a frenzy. Little Bun was even more frenzied. Although little Baozi had always appeared to be smarter than other children, he was still an immature little Baozi. In terms of self-restraint, he could not compare to Air dye. The biggest reason for the zombie riot was actually for flesh and blood. Air dye was different, but it was still a zombie. Little Bun was also half human and half zombie. Therefore, when it came to the full moon, the two of them began to be occupied by primitive desires. The full moon was also the time when zombies were most likely to evolve. Therefore, after the full moon, the search teams would often find that the zombie's strength had increased again. Little Baozi had completely shrunk himself into a ball. His zombie eye was already a dim red. His other ordinary eye was also bloodshot. He needed fresh meat. He craved fresh meat. When it was close to midnight, the full moon hung in the sky. This was the time when the full moon had the greatest effect on zombies. Little Baozi was already rolling around on the bed. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. It seemed that the person outside the door heard the movement inside the room. He tried to open the door, but found that the door was locked from the inside. Soon, a fire inexplicably ignited and burned the door to ashes. Balding walked in with a wretched face. He had a wretched smile on his face. At first glance he saw Air dye, who was facing the wall. Air dye's clothes were unbelievably loose. Her round shoulders were as red as the sunset. They were exposed to the air and looked very seductive. Balding wanted to take advantage of the chaos to find Xiao Tong. Now that all the superpowered people were fighting against the zombies, and Xiao Tong had no superpower and was a weak girl, Xiaoqing and the others would definitely not take Xiao Tong with them. Balding had calculated this, so he secretly came here. Unexpectedly, he didn't find Xiao Tong, but found an excellent one. His balding palm slowly rested on Dummy's shoulder. Dummy's hot skin ironed his palm, which felt extraordinarily good. However, before Balding could do anything, the person in front of him suddenly turned over and pressed him under her body. The person in front of him had dark red eyes, sharp fangs, and long and sharp nails. Although the person in front of him didn't have a rotten face, Balding still recognized her at first glance. "God, a zombie!" The excessive fear made his voice break. He never thought that he would run into a zombie when he was just looking for a girl. It was obvious that this zombie was domesticated. Facing this domesticated Air dye, Balding was scared silly. He reached out his hand to push Air dye away, but Air dye held his wrist with her claws. Her sharp nails directly pierced his wrist. Blood gushed out. The sweet smell made Air dye even more jealous. Even little Baozi, who was in the corner, followed the smell and crawled out. Balding thought, "I'll gather too. I'ma die." Chapter 37. The red-eyed little bun pounced onto the Mediterranean man's body at lightning speed. It had to be said that little bun was really cute. He was white and tender, with long eyelashes and big eyes. If it weren't for the color of his eyes being as red as blood, he would definitely be able to make all the girls, from little girls to old grannies, burst with maternal love. However, his eyes were red and his nails were sharp. Even when he looked at the Mediterranean man, there was a clear coldness in his eyes. The Mediterranean man was still howling because of the wound on his wrist, but now he was silenced. He opened his eyes wide and looked at Little Bun in fear. When he subconsciously wanted to use his ability, Little Bun had already opened his mouth and moved closer to the Mediterranean man's throat. With one bite, he would be able to break the Mediterranean man's throat and let warm and sweet blood spurt out from his broken throat. Air Dai quickly grabbed Little Bun and tore him off from the Mediterranean man's body. He really tore him apart because the Mediterranean man's clothes were torn by Little Bun, leaving a few clear bloody marks. Little Bun was thrown onto the bed and bounced on the soft bedding. He then unwillingly jumped up, but Air Dai pushed him to the ground in the next second. There was only blood flowing out of Little Bun's eyes. He grabbed Dummy's arm with his fingernails piercing into his flesh. His small body kept struggling, and angry voices kept coming out of his throat. Air Dai was determined not to let Little Bun eat blood. As a zombie, he knew better than anyone that a zombie like Little Bun who had never bitten a human would become like a drug addict after eating blood. He couldn't stop. If he wasn't allowed to eat human flesh and drink human blood for a period of time, he would become weak and suffer as if he was addicted to drugs. Xiaoqing had told him to look after Little Bun, so he wouldn't let Little Bun truly become depraved. While Air Dai was suppressing Little Bun, the Mediterranean man staggered up from the ground. He was already scared out of his wits. He didn't want to take advantage of the chaos to deal with Air Dai and Little Bun, so he ran away. Air Dai roared helplessly. He wanted to kill the Mediterranean man, but he couldn't let go of Little Bun. If the Mediterranean man left, his and Little Bun's identities would be exposed. It wouldn't be good for Xiaoqing. While Air Dai was at a loss of what to do, the Mediterranean man suddenly shrieked. From Air Dai's perspective, a bump suddenly appeared on the Mediterranean man's chest. In less than 2 seconds the bump broke and vines crawled out of the wound. The vines were stained with blood and pieces of internal organs. Very quickly, countless slender vines drilled out of Mediterranean's body. These snake-like vines easily riddled his body with holes. Mediterranean lay limp at the door. Blood gradually spread out. Little Bun, who was already in a deranged state, directly went berserk on the other side. Xiaoqing had already arrived at the fence. Through the fence, she could see the densely packed zombies outside the layers of barbed wire. They were relentlessly ramming against the barbed wire. Some parts of the fence were already damaged. After all, no matter how strong the fence was, it couldn't withstand a bunch of senseless zombies ramming into it. At this moment, there were already many people by the fence. Everyone was very nervous. According to past experience, when the sun rose, most of the zombies would gradually disperse. The rest of the zombies wouldn't be a threat. Therefore, as long as they could guard the fence for the night, everything would be fine. However, there were too many zombies outside. Even the group of superpowered people who had experienced hundreds of battles felt numb when they saw this scene. There were several people beside Xiaoqing and the others. Their fingers were trembling as they nodded. Xiaoqing carefully observed the group of ugly zombies outside. Obviously, she found some evolved zombies in the crowd. Evolved zombies were much more powerful than ordinary zombies. Xiaoqing observed that there were definitely a lot of evolved zombies outside, and some of them were very unique. Generally speaking, the most difficult zombies to deal with were not those who looked strong but children. Children had weak bodies and generally they were the first to become zombies after the apocalypse. However, children's bodies evolved the fastest, just like the baby zombie she saw last time. Xiaoqing saw a lot of zombies in the crowd outside. They didn't look easy to deal with. Her worry gradually spread in her heart. The first wave of zombies weren't superpowered people but ordinary people. Each of them had a gun. After climbing up the wall, they began to shoot. Although it was said that zombies would only die if they were shot in the head, they couldn't stand the fact that they had a lot of bullets. They didn't need to shoot directly. They killed as many zombies as they could. After the first round, Xiaoqing saw that a lot of zombies had fallen outside. Obviously, a large group of zombies had been cleared. However, compared with the total number, this large group was incomparable. Reload. After the order was given, the group of people quickly reloaded the bullets and fired at the outside again. Chapter 38. After 5 rounds of bullets, the ordinary people came down from the top of the wall. At that moment, nearly 1/3 of the zombies outside had been killed. It was a really good result, but the price should be all the bullets of the whole base. Xiaoqing found that several zombies had been secretly eating the crystals left by their own kind. Every time a zombie was killed, they would secretly eat the crystals. Xiaoqing was a little anxious. Those crystals should be enough for her to level up, right? Although she was anxious, Xiaoqing still had a sense of propriety. She only planned to sneak out in the middle of the night to collect some crystals without being discovered. Then, a paranormal from the base came to inform Xiaoqing and the others. All the paranormals were divided into 5 teams, and each team would take turns to patrol for 2 hours. They were responsible for eliminating the zombies near the wall. Xiaoqing and the others were assigned to patrol between 12 and 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. People were relatively sleepy at that time, so it should be safer for Xiaoqing to do something. Xiaoqing calculated for a moment, then looked at the zombies outside with sparkling eyes. The paranormals in the base warned the teams one by one to be careful of those mutant zombies. After that, only one team stayed and the others went to rest. The base set up a circle of tents near the wall for them to rest, and in case something happened, they could go over and help at any time. When they went to rest, the team leader kept cheering them on. Just get through tonight, and everything will be fine at dawn. Xiaoqing and the others huddled in the tent, discussing in low voices. We'll see what happens in the second half of the night. If we have a chance, we'll collect some crystals. Although ordinary zombie crystals are not very effective for us, there are too many crystals outside. Xiaoqing calculated carefully. If they could get some crystals, their strength would be greatly improved. There was a gap between 2 level 2 paranormals. It was like 1 was within 10 and 9 was within 10. However, the gap between 9 and 1 was already overwhelming. They didn't talk. After all, it was not easy to get food from a bunch of zombies. Xiaoqing lied naturally. I have a special ability that can make zombies think that I'm their companion for a short time. Then I won't be attacked. In the second half of the night, when we start patrolling, I'll go out and have a look. They had seen Xiaoqing sneak into the riot of zombies and come back safely with an air die. So they trusted Xiaoqing very much. Be careful. Don't worry. Xiaoqing made an okay gesture and waited for midnight. Soon it was time for their night shift. In order to solve the problem that year, they were not separated. Instead, they were organized into a group. They stood in a corner and watched the wandering zombies outside the wall. Once a zombie approached, Yan Hanqing would act as a bait and lure it. Then Gu Chuan would freeze the zombie's legs. Xiaoqing would tie the zombie up. And Gu Panpan would rush forward with a knife to cut the zombie's head open and take away the crystal. The zombie's body was mercilessly abandoned. When it was almost 1 o'clock, they found that no one was approaching. Xiaoqing jumped over the wall and rode on the top of the wall. Xiaoqing chose a place with a lot of zombie corpses to land. After looking around, she began to look for the crystal. The more she looked, the more she found that these zombies were getting smarter. Because many of the corpses on the ground had their heads hollowed out, and the crystal in their heads had been taken away. Just as she thought humans were evolving, zombies were also evolving. And the speed of evolution was very fast. Whether it was strength, speed, or intelligence, they were all the same. If they continued to evolve, maybe one day, zombies would be able to wear suits and sneak into the crowd and choose delicious humans to eat. When that time comes, they could only rely on guessing to distinguish between humans and zombies. After Xiaoqing came down, she began to collect the crystal while observing. Of course, she observed the mutated zombies hidden in the zombie crowd. There was a female zombie. She didn't know where she found a flower and put it on her head. It was crooked, and together with her highly rotten face and body, it looked particularly scary. There was also a little lowly zombie that was only about 1.34 meters tall. The degree of decomposition was relatively light, and it looked quite cute. It was closer to the skin color of a normal person. Xiaoqing calmly looked at the lowly zombie. She was ready to observe if it was a special existence like her and air die. Then she saw the zombie bare its teeth and fiercely stare at Xiaoqing. After all, Xiaoqing's main task was to collect the crystal. She decided not to waste any more time. When she lowered her head to collect the crystal, the lowly zombie suddenly screamed with a sharp voice, as if to warn Xiaoqing that this was her territory. Chapter 39. Xiaoqing had just taken out a crystal when the little lowly zombie suddenly rushed over. Its speed was so fast that Xiaoqing didn't even have time to prepare before it was already in front of her. However, Xiaoqing's movements were very fast. She kicked the corpse in front of her and directly smashed it on the little lowly zombie. The corpse was instantly torn apart, but it also blocked the little lowly zombie for a moment, giving Xiaoqing time to react. When the little lowly zombie rushed in front of Xiaoqing like an arrow, Xiaoqing had already used one foot to support her momentum and rushed forward. She used her elbow as the tip and collided with the little lowly zombie. The little lowly zombie immediately flew out as if it was hit by a train. It mercilessly hit a tree, and one could clearly hear the sound of bones breaking. However, Xiaoqing only took one step back. Her expression was very indifferent as she stepped forward. Before the little lowly zombie could get up, she grabbed its neck with one hand, clenched her other hand into a fist, and fiercely smashed it down. When the first punch landed, the little lowly zombie's head jerked back, and its neck snapped. Even so, it still opened its mouth and tried to use its fangs to bite Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing expressionlessly pressed down on its neck. Even if the little lowly zombie's nails made 5 bloody holes in her shoulder, she didn't let go. She smashed the little lowly zombie's head into a pile of meat paste. Picking up the crystal in the meat paste, Xiaoqing glanced around. Those restless mutated zombies quietly retreated. She could easily kill the little lowly zombie because the little lowly zombie's mutation was speed, so it was easier to deal with. If those mutated zombies swarmed her, she could only run away and die. After putting away the crystal, Xiaoqing collected some zombie crystals nearby, then returned to the base. After returning, Xiaoqing said to the others seriously, "I think something is wrong. If anything happens, remember to run away immediately. Don't stay for too long." "What happened?" Yin Hanqing's voice was a little hoarse. His gaze fell on Xiaoqing's shoulder, where her clothes were torn, revealing a few bloody holes in her fair skin. "There are a lot of mutated zombies outside and they are very aggressive. I carefully observed them, and found that the zombies are very orderly, as if they are organized. My intuition is that tonight will not end so easily, so everyone should be careful." Xiaoqing whispered. "Big Sister Qing is right. No matter what happens, we have to be prepared." Gu Panpan nodded. She had already begun to look around for a suitable escape route. Xiaoqing continued, "Once something happens, we will immediately return and leave with Air Dai and the others." Gu Panpan nodded, but before she could speak, she suddenly heard a scream piercing through the sky. "What happened?" Gu Panpan immediately activated her ability and looked in the direction of the scream. Not far away, a patrol team suddenly became chaotic. A monkey-like creature pushed a person to the ground, and suddenly flesh and blood splattered everywhere. "It's a zombie. How did it get in?" Gu Panpan clenched the military knife in her hand and said nervously, "It should be a special ability." Xiaoqing also pulled out her military knife and vigilantly looked outside the wall. As she expected, several large, hairy, and moldy giant zombies rushed towards the first layer of barbed wire. The barbed wire that blocked countless zombies was easily smashed like a bubble. Then the second layer of protection, the third layer. In just a few seconds, the strange-looking giant zombie rushed to the front of the wall. The wall, which was specially built to resist the zombies, was as fragile as paper. The moment the wall collapsed, Xiaoqing heard a different howl. Then, the group of zombies that were wandering aimlessly rushed over, as if they had heard some order. Xiaoqing said nothing and began to retreat with her teammates. They did not even prepare to resist, because Xiaoqing was very clear that the base was finished. When they quietly retreated, the whole base sounded the alarm. The ability users, who were originally light sleepers, and the ordinary people who had some fighting power, all took out their weapons and ran out. But as soon as they came out, they were stunned. The wall, which was as solid as the Great Wall in their eyes, had several gaps, and the zombies rushed in. They were a little desperate, especially the ordinary people. Ability users were not infected, but the ordinary people, as long as they were scratched or bitten by the zombies, they would be finished. Xiaoqing and Yin Hanqing had quickly returned to their place. As soon as they got back, they smelled the strong smell of blood. Xiaoqing's face changed quickly, and she kicked the door open. She saw the bald man lying in front of the door. Blood spread out under his body, dyeing the floor dark red. Air Dye was curled up on the bed, holding little Bun in his arms. Hearing the sound, Air Dye raised his head as if he was relieved. There were several wounds on his cheeks, probably caused by little Bun. Pan, go get Xiao Tong. Let's go. Xiaoqing did not have time to ask any more questions. She grabbed Air Dye, hugged little Bun and pulled Air Dye out. They had to leave this base. Chapter 40. Xiaoqing paused and patted little Bun's head. Why are you suddenly talking about your father? Because everyone has a father. Tong's father wanted to sell her. Little Bun rolled around in Xiaoqing's arms unhappily. Is it because my father doesn't want me, so mommy took me away? No, it's because we don't want him anymore. Xiaoqing hugged little Bun tighter and said indifferently, Baby, before you ask a question, you have to make an assumption. For example, the question just now, are you handsome? Are you cute? Little Bun stared seriously with his big eyes. I'm cool and cute. That's right. Who would be willing to abandon you? Xiaoqing didn't think that her son was narcissistic at all. She also thought that her son was very cute. Little Baozi immediately nodded his head. That's right. Who would be willing to abandon me? What about Daddy? Is Daddy dead? Xiaoqing didn't intend to lie to little Bun. She felt that her son had the right to know the truth. Moreover, her son wasn't an ordinary child. She thought about it. With that man's methods, even in the apocalypse he wouldn't die so easily. She said, he's probably not dead yet. But it's okay. Mommy will personally send him to his death. Little Bun stared with his eyes wide open. Daddy must be a bad guy. And he's a bad guy. Xiaoqing patted little Bun's butt. Go to sleep. While coaxing little Bun to sleep, Xiaoqing thought that she had overlooked a very big problem. It was said that children from single-parent families would easily grow up to be bad, like drug addicts or delinquents. Especially those who lacked paternal love, they would easily become bad children. Moreover, it was said that children yearn for paternal love. Xiaoqing touched her chin. To be honest, she thought that it would be good to be single for the rest of her life. But now, she felt that even if it was for little Bun's sake, she had to find another father for him. She had to find someone who treated little Bun well, and didn't mind that she and little Bun weren't human. It seemed a little difficult. Mama is going to sleep first. Little Bun came up to Xiaoqing and gave her a kiss. Then he said with a serious face, You'll become an old hag if you sleep too late. Xiaoqing was amused and fell asleep with little Bun in her arms. The next day when Xiaoqing woke up, little Bun and Xiaoqing were still asleep. But Air Dye woke up early and kept looking at her. Xiaoqing touched her face uneasily, then carefully put the little Bun on the bed and prepared to brush her teeth and wash her face. Air Dye followed Xiaoqing like a little tail. During this time, Xiaoqing pressed her to wash her face and brush her teeth. Xiaoqing was ready to go back and have a look. She wanted to cremate those who had not yet turned into zombies, or those who had turned into zombies. She didn't want those who might have been good when they were alive to become monsters after death. It would probably be better to let them return to the earth. She couldn't save them, nor could she help them. The only thing she could do was to release their bodies. Moreover, Yan Hanqing's mother's body was still in the base. After breakfast, the group of people went to the base. They smelled the strong smell of blood from afar. The smell was strong and pungent. There were some scattered zombies wandering around and didn't retreat. They were probably attracted by the smell of blood. Gu Panpan was responsible for clearing the way. Gu Chuan and Yan Hanqing cleaned up the sides. Xiaoqing was responsible for taking her son and the other two who weren't in a good condition to walk forward. When they reached the gate of the base, everyone couldn't help but stop, because the scene in front of them could only be described with one word. Shocking. There were zombies and human corpses everywhere. Oh no, it should be zombie corpses and human skeletons. Most of the human corpses had been gnawed until only red meat and bones were left, and small pieces of limbs were left, as well as blood all over the ground. Xiaoqing thought that she probably thought too much. There shouldn't be many people in the base who could turn into zombies, because most of them were eaten by those zombies who never knew what it was like to be full. When Xiaoqing and the others walked into the base, they really had a feeling that they had walked into the Azura field. The ones who were more miserable than ordinary people were probably the people with superpowers. People with superpowers couldn't be infected by zombies, so they were bitten to death or eaten while they were still alive. As for ordinary people, because of their strong bodies, even if they died more quickly and less painfully than people with superpowers. When the group of people walked through the residential area, they began to see scattered zombies. Most of those crippled and missing beginner zombies should have been injured and hiding in the house until the zombie poison took effect. In addition to these, the others rarely turned into zombies. Occasionally there would be a few zombies, but only a part of their body was left, which probably wasn't eaten completely. Xiaoqing found the off-road vehicle that contained Yan Hanqing's mother, and then let Yan Hanqing drive it out first, and then continued to look around with the others. Finally, they confirmed that there was no living person in the base, and then they began to set fire everywhere. Most of the base was made of tents and wooden houses, so it was easy to burn, and the first place to burn was the tent area. Xiaoqing and the others left the base, standing on the high slope outside the base. The whole base, including the broken zombies and the skeletons on the ground, was covered by the raging flames. "Let's go." Xiaoqing glanced around, and then found an axe from the off-road vehicle. Chapter 41. Xiaoqing felt that it was neither a human nor a monster. It was just a pile of rotten meat that would shatter into pieces with a single punch. However, Gu Panpan's probing just now had shown that it was not a pile of rotten meat, but a bone that was hard to chew. Moreover, it was a very ugly bone. Xiaoqing watched as the thing got up shakily and stared at them with a fierce gaze. Then it charged at them at a strange speed. Its speed was so fast that everyone saw it standing there shakily a second ago. In the next second, it had already appeared in front of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing twirled the military knife in her hand and quickly stabbed it into the thing's stomach. However, it did not seem to feel anything and continued to charge forward. It almost hit Xiaoqing. Yan Hanqing reacted quickly and kicked the thing. Yan Hanqing was very strong and the thing was kicked backward. Xiaoqing had already pulled out the military knife and stabbed it hard into its throat. At this time, Xiaoqing was sure that it was indeed a monster. Because its throat was stabbed, it still reached out to grab Xiaoqing without feeling anything at all. Gu Panpan quickly took over. Then it was a one-sided beating. The thing was thrown around by Gu Panpan like a rag sack. Its arms, legs, and the flesh on its body were thrown everywhere. They fell off like snow, revealing the bones that were dyed red. In the end, Gu Panpan swung her hand and the thing fell to the ground. Gu Panpan clapped her hands and said, "It can't even withstand a single blow." Then she was horrified to find that the monster that no longer looked like a human slowly got up again. Even when it got up, charred flesh kept falling off its body. There was even a hole in its stomach. Through the hole she could see a mess of internal organs. As it moved, intestines slowly flowed out. The intestines hung on its stomach like a ball of string, but it did not feel anything. It shook its head and pounced on Gu Panpan. To be honest, Gu Panpan had seen more bloody and disgusting scenes, but this scene was the most unacceptable to her. Gu Panpan could not help but retreat. She did not want to touch the monster at all. Gu Chuan saved her. The icicles were like hidden weapons that kept hitting the monster's body. Then more flesh fell off. Xiaoqing found that its flesh was like cooked pork ribs. It could easily fall off the bones, but its bones were exceptionally tough. Gu Chuan's icicles did not even leave a mark on its bones. No. Gu Panpan's face suddenly changed. She quickly held her right hand. The back of her right hand swelled up like a steamed bun. Gu Panpan cut it with her knife. Black blood gushed out. "Don't touch it. It's poisonous." Xiaoqing could not help but feel a little scared. After all, she had almost hugged the monster. If she had been hugged tightly, who knew if she would have been poisoned? Xiaoqing felt a headache coming on. She released her little flower. The man-eating flower opened its petals and rushed forward, swallowing the monster in one gulp. Then, just when everyone was relieved, the man-eating flower opened its petals again. Like a normal person vomiting, it spat out the monster. Its delicate red petals withered. Its huge corolla shook and spat out black-red chunks of flesh. Along with it, it spat out broken stamens. The stamens, which could secrete a liquid that could digest humans, were corroded black. Only the monster, which was left with only its head and organs and bones, got up again. The flesh on its face was also falling off piece by piece, especially its eyelids. Only 2 rolling eyeballs were left. It was pitch black and only its pupils were left. It looked extremely terrifying. With every step it took, a piece of its organs fell out of its body. Gu Panpan could not stand it anymore. She screamed, "Kill it! God, it's so scary!" But they did not know what this thing was. Melee fighters could not touch it, and ranged fighters could not snatch its bones. It was very troublesome. The only good thing was that it did not have any attack power. Just as this thought flashed through Xiaoqing's mind, she saw the ugly monster suddenly open its mouth. A green gas came out of its mouth. The gas spread very quickly. Almost in an instant it covered everyone. Xiaoqing's vision turned black and she fell to the ground. Gu Chuan and the others were even worse. Black blood began to flow out of their mouths. Xiaoqing's mind flashed. She instantly understood that this monster was most likely a psychic when it was alive. It was a poison-type psychic. In last night's incident, he did not know what happened to it to become like this. When the monster slowly came closer, Xiaoqing discovered a second terrifying fact. The reason why the flesh on its body fell off so easily was because it wasn't its flesh at all. Those were things that it had taken from the bodies of the living or the dead. Chapter 42. For a moment, an indescribable chill spread all over their bodies, because they could see the greed in the monster's naked eyes. The monster was greedy for their flesh and bodies. Xiaoqing curled up her palms. The feeling of powerlessness made her feel indescribably dispirited. Since the end of the world, everything had been too smooth for her. Whether it was the discovery of the secret of the crystal stone, which allowed her to advance ahead of others, or her extraordinary physique, which allowed her to move freely among the zombies, she had unconsciously let down her guard. Otherwise, she would not have been poisoned so easily. Seeing the monster approaching step by step, Xiaoqing felt more and more guilty and decadent. She tried to move her body. Her body was not a living body, so the strange poison dissipated slowly and could not flow with her blood. She should be able to recover in 10 more minutes, but the monster was already in front of her. Xiaoqing was desperate. But at that moment the monster seemed to have bumped into something and bounced away. Xiaoqing seemed to see a transparent cover vaguely, covering them in the middle. After the monster got up, it walked over again. Then, as Xiaoqing expected, it was bounced away again. Xiaoqing followed the vague energy fluctuation and looked back. She saw Xiaotong holding the little bun tightly. Her dilated pupils showed some fear. Only her face was getting paler and paler, which showed that she was consuming her strength rapidly. And that faintly discernible fluctuation actually came from Xiaotong's body. Xiaotong was probably a psychic. Xiaoqing's first reaction was to speed up her recovery. She knew that Xiaotong could not hold on for long no matter what happened. Every time the thin cover was hit, it could be seen that the cover trembled violently. Then, the moment the monster was bounced away, the cover would become more transparent. When the monster hit her for the 5th time, Xiaotong had curled up. She grew up being beaten so she could endure the pain. But at that time, she could not help but groan in a low voice. The rolling tears were gradually mixed with the color of blood. In the end, they were almost tears of blood. This was the sign of overusing her spiritual power. If her 7 orifices began to bleed, there were only 2 results. Either her head would explode or she would become a real idiot. Xiaoqing moved her arms. She had been very tired of her body that did not know fatigue, feelings, or taste, but now she was incomparably grateful that she was different from ordinary people. When the monster came over again, Xiaoqing suddenly stood up. Green vines wrapped around her body in a moment, wrapping her like a green cocoon. Then Xiaoqing rushed out like a cannonball and directly pushed the monster to the ground. This time she was fully prepared. The vines isolated her from the monster's body. Only the poisonous smoke could put people down when it came into contact with their skin. She couldn't think of a way at the moment. However, Xiaoqing felt that such a big move could not be casually used. So Xiaoqing decided to give it a try. Probably because she used too much strength, Xiaoqing and the monster rolled into a ball. Xiaoqing was ruthless. The vines wrapped around her hands were beaten into juice by her continuous punches. The monster's face was also beaten to a pulp by Xiaoqing. In the end, only bones with minced meat and eyeballs were left. Finally, with a crack, the neck bone broke. The whole head tilted back by a wide margin, bending at a 90-degree angle. Xiaoqing kept gasping for breath. She saw the monster slowly push its head with the bones of its hand. With a crack, its head was straightened back. It opened its mouth, and the flesh at the corner of its mouth fell. Then Xiaoqing punched it again, and it leaned back violently. The tattered monster suddenly trembled. Its skin and flesh began to melt, turning into a pool of black and red liquid that flowed down. When Xiaoqing touched the liquid, the vines on her body were quickly corroded. At this time, Xiaoqing could only leave its body and retreat to the side. The liquid that flowed down from the monster's body quickly corroded the ground. The monster moved its bony fingers, making cracking sounds. Its whole body only had one eyeball left in its eye socket. The other eyeball was hanging out of its eye socket. The monster's bony face did not have any expression, but Xiaoqing felt that it was smiling strangely. In the next second, it suddenly appeared in front of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing only had time to cross her arms in front of her chest. The bony fingers turned into claws and pierced into Xiaoqing's arm, tearing off a large piece of flesh. Dai, who was standing at the side, roared and rushed forward. He knocked the monster away like a cannonball. "Be careful!" Xiaoqing's eyes widened, but it was too late to stop him. She could only watch as the skeleton's claws pierced through Dai's abdomen and came out from his back. Even so, Dai was still holding the skeleton fiercely. His sharp nails pierced into the back of the skeleton's neck. Chapter 43. Dai was really like a cornered wolf. He grabbed the back of the monster's neck and kept hitting the monster's face with his forehead. When the monster tried to pull its hand out of his abdomen, Dai reached out and grabbed its arm, not letting it go. But the monster was too strong. Dai couldn't hold it down. After his abdomen was pierced by the monster's arm, he was easily lifted over the monster's head. Xiaoqing could hear the screeching sound of his fingernails rubbing against the monster's bones. Then Dai's body was thrown out. Even with a big hole in his abdomen and his body almost falling apart, Dai dragged his broken body and desperately crawled towards Xiaoqing. Dai didn't know when he regained his consciousness. He just suddenly woke up one day and found that something was different about him. Then, before he followed his companions to hunt for humans, he met Xiaoqing. Dai's intuition told him that Xiaoqing was his companion. But Xiaoqing was different from all his companions. She looked different from those ugly zombies. Dai couldn't help but follow her. Then he was caught by Xiaoqing. Dai was prepared to be eaten by Xiaoqing. After all, it was normal for zombies to dig out each other's crystals and eat them. But Xiaoqing didn't. She gave him food, crystals, and gave him a name. It made him feel that he had regained something he had lost. At that time, Dai only thought that Xiaoqing was very beautiful. He wanted to follow her forever and protect her. So, even if he died again, it didn't matter. As long as she was well, it was fine. Xiaoqing looked at Dummy, who was crawling over little by little, and then looked at the seemingly indestructible monster. She slowly took out 2 crystal stones from the space. One was of the Thunder system and the other was of the Earth system. She had never used them. The moment she absorbed the energy from the crystals, the energy in her body would surge. That was her chance. Even if she died or became disabled, Xiaoqing had to do it. She had no other choice. When she joined the army, the instructor asked her why she chose to be a special forces soldier. Xiaoqing said it was because she wanted to protect someone. But now she still wanted to protect those people. But those people were still Little Bun and Dai. But Xiaoqing didn't have time to use the 2 crystals. Someone grabbed the crystals from her palm and swallowed them. This person was none other than Yan Hanqing, who was struggling to crawl over. The moment he swallowed the crystal, this unyielding man let out a blood-curdling scream. The surface of his body suddenly erupted with lightning, mixed with an earthy yellow color. Then the surface of his skin instantly cracked, and blood instantly flowed out. Yan Hanqing struggled and threw himself at the monster. When the monster came into contact with the lightning on Yan Hanqing's body, it began to scream. Yan Hanqing immediately hugged the monster and rolled down the slope. Lightning flashed continuously. Xiaoqing stood up and staggered over. If she absorbed the crystals, she still had a chance to live. But if Yan Hanqing swallowed the crystals, he was just an ordinary person. Other than exploding, was there any other outcome? When Xiaoqing ran down the slope, Yan Hanqing and the monster were lying motionless in a depression. The monster's white bones had turned black. When Xiaoqing went to help Yan Hanqing, she accidentally touched the monster. It instantly turned into ashes, leaving only a black crystal lying in the ashes. When Xiaoqing touched Yan Hanqing, she was electrified. But she gritted her teeth and carried Yan Hanqing on her back. She picked up the crystals and walked up the slope. The slope was full of injured people. When Xiaoqing carried Yan Hanqing up the slope, she had no strength left. Her legs were weak and she knelt beside Air Dai. Then Xiaoqing helped Air Dai check his injuries. If he was alive, he would have died. Xiaoqing was very glad that Air Dai was a zombie. There was a circular hole in his abdomen. Through the hole, she could see the ground behind him. Air Dai looked at Xiaoqing with grievance. Obviously, his situation was not bad. Xiaoqing let out a sigh of relief. But the more serious thing was still to come. Xiaoqing looked at Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan expressionlessly. As you can see, Air Dai is a zombie. I am not a pure human. I was infected with a zombie virus when I was on the verge of death. Then I became like this. I am sorry to hide it from you for so long. Now you can leave. I need to use the off-road vehicle, or else I can't take the injured people away. You can take all the food in the car. Xiaoqing was very clear that not everyone could accept being with a zombie. Even if she was rational, everyone was afraid. What if she woke up in the middle of the night and lost her rationality and bit everyone? So even if Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan chose to leave, she would not blame them. After all, it was human nature. Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan looked at each other. After a long time, Gu Panpan bit her lips and said, "Sister Qing, I am sorry." Chapter 44. It's okay, I can understand. Xiaoqing smiled and slowly helped Yan Hanqing and Air Dai up. Gu Panpan and his sister didn't choose to fight because of their past relationship. No, Sister Qing. Gu Panpan suddenly got up. Her limbs were still weak, but she still walked over and helped Xiaoqing to help Yan Hanqing up. Gu Chuan also helped Little Bun and Xiao Tong up. Gu Panpan grinned, revealing her white teeth. Sister Qing, I thought about it and realized that even if you and Dumbo were both zombies, it wouldn't be something we can't accept. Even if something happens in the future, it doesn't matter. My brother and I are both psychics. We're not afraid of being bitten. Xiaoqing couldn't help but look at the siblings. Their eyes were filled with sincerity, without the slightest bit of falsehood, nor was it a forced pretense. Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan really felt that even if they were zombies, they could accept it. It was only because they were them, not others. With such trust and care, was there a need for anything else to prove their friendship? Xiaoqing thought that she used to have Mulin, but now she had Gu Panpan and the others. She was really satisfied. God had taken away too many things from her. She had a beautiful childhood, healthy parents and a complete family, but she was also given too much. Xiaoqing felt that she was already satisfied. What more could she ask for? After carrying the seriously injured into the car, Xiaoqing immediately drove back to the place where they stayed last night. When they were in the car, Yan Hanqing was already on the verge of dying. His skin had already turned purple. The thunder crystal was too overbearing. Even the earth crystal of the same level was gradually being forced out of his body. Now the surface of Yan Hanqing's body was constantly flashing with small lightning bolts, and there were horrible cracks like a spider web. Yan Hanqing's exposed skin was densely covered with small cracks. Yan Hanqing's clothes were dyed red with blood. Through those wounds, Xiaoqing could see the flesh and blood. Air Dai looked like he was more seriously injured. In fact, Yan Hanqing was the one who was dying. Air Dai was fine. After all, he didn't have a human body. His recovery ability was stronger. Ordinary physical injuries, unless it was a serious head injury, would not endanger his life. Yan Hanqing, on the other hand, was different. He was just an ordinary person and didn't even have any special abilities. However, he was able to swallow a level 2 thunder crystal without exploding in an instant. His body was already tough enough, but he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Xiaoqing bit her lip. She drove like a madwoman. The tires rubbed against the ground, almost bursting with sparks. Hold on a little longer. Just a little longer. Xiaoqing didn't know if she was talking to Yan Hanqing or herself. But God never liked it when things went too smoothly. Xiaoqing had just turned a corner when she saw a light black sedan speeding over from the end of the road. She immediately turned the steering wheel. But she didn't expect the other side to also want to dodge. Probably nervous, the other side also turned the steering wheel in the same direction. Then the two cars collided without any suspense. Fortunately, both sides had already braked and reduced the speed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as a collision. Xiaoqing's face almost hit the glass. She turned around and saw Yan Hanqing. Because of the violent turbulence, 2 streaks of red were slowly dripping from his nose. He has reached his limit. This thought flashed through Xiaoqing's mind like lightning. No, I have to find a safe place immediately and settle Yan Hanqing down. Only then can I think of a way. Chapter 45. But at that moment 5 or 6 aggressive men got out of the car and knocked on Xiaoqing's window with steel pipes. Xiaoqing didn't want to waste any more time with them, so she rolled down the window and looked out with a poker face. Sorry, what kind of compensation do you want? One of the thin men saw the injured people through the window. His eyes brightened, and he poked the leader, whispering, "Boss, look." He pointed to the window. The leader's eyes also brightened, and he smiled obscenely. What compensation? Well, I want this car and everything in it. I won't touch the people and they can leave, but... He pointed at Xiaoqing and Gu Panpan. You two have to stay and accompany us, brothers. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. The 6 of us are all ability users. Xiaoqing's eyes became redder and redder. Gu Panpan wanted to teach them a lesson, but he was stopped by Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing opened the door and got out. She tilted her head slightly and smiled coldly. Say it again, what do you want? The leader said. Didn't I just say that I want to... Before he could finish his words, his eyes had already widened. The last thing he saw was Xiaoqing's face, which looked a little sinister after being splattered with blood. The people behind him only saw a white hand coming out of his back, and then the leader's body was torn in half. The beautiful woman came out of the rain of blood, looking like an Azura crawling out of hell. Those people were scared out of their wits. They had all experienced the turmoil of the apocalypse. What had they not seen before? But they were still frightened by Xiaoqing. Only a chubby bespectacled man was the first to react. He quickly condensed an earth shield in front of him, but in the next second, the earth shield was easily shattered by the snow-white fist. Xiaoqing, who was covered in blood, appeared in front of him with a strange smile. Then she grabbed his neck. The next second, his head was separated from his body, and his head was twisted off by Xiaoqing. The head with glasses rolled on the ground twice and then it stopped moving. The other 4 people were scared by Xiaoqing's brutality, and they ran away immediately. The thin man looked back and saw a huge flower head behind him, and then it opened its petals and swallowed him directly. He went in, the other 3 people saw it, and they immediately ran in 3 directions. Their meaning was very clear. You are alone, can you catch up with 3 people? One of them was running and then he saw a pair of legs in front of him and then there was no more because he was punched in the head and his neck was smashed. The last 2 people were probably the most pitiful because they had run far away, and then they were dragged back by the vines. One of them looked back and saw that his companion had been torn apart. He was scared to the point of peeing, and his legs were soft. He couldn't stop begging for mercy. Let me go, I know I was wrong, Xiaoqing was too lazy to listen to him and she stomped on his head. The ground was full of corpses and no one was intact. Anyone who saw this scene would be disgusted and vomit. Xiaoqing was expressionless, and they could only blame themselves for being unlucky. They ran into Xiaoqing in this state, and their death was not in vain. Xiaoqing! Gu Chuan grabbed the edge of the window and shouted at Xiaoqing with a serious expression. Xiaoqing's body shook, and the red in her eyes slowly faded. She took a long breath and the anxiety in her heart eased a little, and then she walked quickly to the car. Chapter 46. That night, Yin Hanqing's body began to rapidly transform into a zombie. However, it was unknown whether it was because of the thunder crystal in his body, but although the wounds on Yin Hanqing's body began to heal, it did not develop into a zombie's rapidly rotting body. Only his skin became more and more pale. One could even see the blue veins under his skin, and the occasional flash of lightning. Xiaoqing came downstairs after taking a shower. She saw Yin Hanqing lying quietly on the bed, an air dye slowly recovering. Xiaotong curled herself into a ball on the sofa, sleeping soundly. Only her psychic fluctuations told Xiaoqing that she was also recovering. Xiaoqing wanted to carry Xiaotong upstairs, but she was afraid that she would trigger something and interfere with Xiaotong's recovery. She gave up and quietly returned to her room. After returning, Xiaoqing sat on the bed and released her vines. The vines were originally green in color, and even the barbs on them were green. But now the vines looked green from afar. But if one looked closely, they would notice that there were dark green lines on them. Especially the barbs on the tip, there was a hint of black in the dark green color, which looked particularly scary. This was the change that occurred after she used the vines to isolate herself from the monster. It was as if the vines were infected by the monster's poison after being in contact with it for too long. As the owner of the vines, Xiaoqing could feel the changes in the vines. In the past, although her vines had a little anesthetic toxin, it was very mild. Most of the time she used it as a rope to tie people up. She originally thought that now that she was at level 2, she could go and tame a second plant. However, the vines gave her a pleasant surprise. Now her vines had 2 more abilities. The first was rapid regeneration, which consumed her ability. The second was parasitism. Previously, she had used a parasitic ability to plant seeds in Mediterranean's body. But this time the parasitism was much more useful. The small seeds were like bacteria, very difficult to detect. Also, after parasitizing a person, it was not like before where it would germinate. This time it was controlled by Xiaoqing, and it could sleep in a person's body for a long time. Once Xiaoqing controlled the seeds to wake up, the rapidly growing seeds would inject poison into the person, corroding the person's internal organs. In the end, only the vines would be left in the person's stomach. This was undoubtedly a very scary ability. Of course, the most important thing was the poison. After the vines were infected with the monster's poison, they evolved. Although they could not completely lose control of the body like the monster, they inherited the monster's poison, which was especially corrosive and had some anesthetic effects. Xiaoqing immediately decided that before she reached level 3, she would not look for other plants to replace her vines. Also, Xiaoqing gave her vines a name, Ghost Vine, nicknamed Little Ghost. Although the battle made them hover on the edge of life and death, and they almost lost their lives, the harvest was also huge. Xiaoqing felt that she could break through to level 3 at any time. As long as she absorbed some more crystals, she could smoothly break through. However, now that she was surrounded by a group of seriously injured people, Xiaoqing did not dare to break through. Otherwise, if something happened to her during the process, wouldn't she be killed? After Xiaoqing recovered a little and studied the effects of the vines, she fed little Bun until he was full and left the room. Yin Hanqing still did not wake up. She suspected that the zombie poison was fighting with the thunder power in Yin Hanqing's body. If the thunder power won, the zombie poison would not be so terrible. Yin Hanqing was very likely to control this power and become a thunder power paranormal. After all, paranormals could not be infected. Of course, this was the best result. If the zombie poison won, Yin Hanqing would become a zombie. If he was lucky, he could keep his reason and thinking like Xiaoqing. If he was unlucky, he would become an ordinary zombie, only knowing hunger and eating flesh. Xiaoqing had prepared for the worst. Even if Yin Hanqing became that kind of zombie, Xiaoqing would raise him and feed him with crystals, hoping that when Yin Hanqing evolved to a high level, he would regain his reason. When she was in the base, she heard that after gradual exploration, people divided paranormals and zombies into 9 levels. The higher the level of zombies, the more flexible and smart they were. Level 2 and Level 3 zombies could already lead their companions to besiege human beings. They could retreat and ambush human beings. What if they evolved to Level 9? Would he be able to become like a normal person? Xiaoqing also knew that if zombies really evolved to the highest level, It would really be a disaster for human beings. After all, zombies' food was human beings. Even if they had wisdom, zombies would use their wisdom to hunt human beings instead of becoming good friends with human beings. It was just like how human beings would captive livestock for the purpose of eating them. If high-level zombies could disguise themselves and sneak into the base like Xiaoqing, what would be a disaster for human beings? However, Xiaoqing didn't want to think about things that were so far away. Right now, she only hoped that Yan Hanqing could develop well. Gradually, Xiao Tong recovered. Air Dai could also hang on Xiaoqing's body and act like a spoiled child. Gu Chuan and his sister also recovered. Only Yan Hanqing didn't wake up. On the morning of the third day, when several people came out to eat, Yan Hanqing slowly sat up. Several people suddenly became vigilant. If Yan Hanqing became a zombie, they must first control Yan Hanqing to prevent him from hurting people. However, Yan Hanqing's first words after sitting up were, "I didn't die?" Several people immediately relaxed. After all, zombies couldn't talk. However, Xiaoqing had to confirm again. She looked at Yan Hanqing. Yan Hanqing's skin was still showing a sense of death, but he looked no different from a normal person. His eyes and hands didn't change at all. Xiaoqing touched Yan Hanqing's chest. The thumping heartbeat beat against Xiaoqing's palm. The warm skin also told Xiaoqing that Yan Hanqing didn't become a zombie. An indescribable excitement reverberated in Xiaoqing's heart. She raised her head and wanted to say something, but then she saw that Yan Hanqing's face had turned red all the way to his earlobes. His body stiffened, and after a long time, he finally reacted and stuffed his naked body under the covers. Xiaoqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yan Hanqing's clothes were already bloody and tattered. He definitely couldn't wear it. In the end, Gu Chuan provided a set of clothes for Yan Hanqing. Gu Chuan was shorter and thinner than Yan Hanqing. His clothes were tight on Yan Hanqing's body, outlining the outline of his muscles. This made Yan Hanqing feel helpless. Xiaoqing couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, her heart was satisfied. No matter what, they were all fine. This was already the best result. Chapter 47. Although it was a thrilling experience, fortunately, everyone was fine and their strength had improved. Among them, Yan Hanqing's injuries were the heaviest, but he also gained the most. He had a special ability, and it was the famous lightning ability. Originally, Yan Hanqing didn't say anything, but he felt inferior in his heart. After all, he was the only one without a special ability. He said that he wanted to repay Xiaoqing, but he couldn't do anything. Until now, he really had the ability to fulfill his promise. Air Dai, who was discovered, became more active. He ran and jumped in the forest and used the bloody cloth to attract a lot of zombies. After that, he nimbly got into the car. Yan Hanqing quickly released his lightning ability. Suddenly, a large number of zombies were like epilepsy, twitching for a long time before lying down. Xiaoqing went forward and tried. She found that the zombies weren't dead yet, so she waited on the side. After a while, the zombies regained their ability to move. She and Gu Panpan quickly dealt with the zombies. After our experiment, we found that if there are 1 or 2 zombies, we can kill them in one hit. If there are too many of them, we can only make them temporarily lose their ability to move. Ordinary zombies will be affected for about 10 seconds, and level 2 zombies will only be restricted for 3 to 5 seconds. The zombies within 10 meters won't be able to escape, and the effect will be even worse if they are further away. Xiaoqing rationally analyzed, but Hanqing is only level 1 now. When his level increases, the corresponding power will also increase. Yan Hanqing didn't feel dispirited. After all, being able to have a special ability was already a great progress. He should be able to help Xiaoqing more as he slowly leveled up. Xiaoqing distributed the crystals to everyone, and then looked at the map. We will soon reach Hanqing's hometown. Let's eat something. There is a fork in the road ahead, so we won't stop to rest at noon. Xiaoqing didn't need to eat, so she was responsible for driving. The others ate in the back. Xiaoqing also fed Xiaobao some food. There was a big river in front of them. The bridge across the river collapsed, blocking the road. Xiaoqing had to ask Yan Hanqing, "Is there any other way?" Yan Hanqing thought for a moment and said, "After passing the mountain in front, We will reach the cemetery in our village. It is said that the feng shui on the mountain is very good. Someone even rented the land in our village to build a cemetery. So, the road on the mountain should be able to walk. Xiaoqing nodded and turned the car directly into the mountain. The mountain road wasn't wide, just enough for one car to pass. If there was a car coming from the opposite direction, the wrong car wouldn't be able to pass. Xiaoqing didn't encounter anything along the way, and safely crossed the mountain. When she reached the other side of the mountain, she saw the cemetery that Yan Hanqing had mentioned. The location of the cemetery was next to the cemetery in their village. Later it was contracted by someone, and the cemetery was built in the name of good feng shui. There were many people who came here to buy a cemetery. They were all rich people who wanted to bury their dead in a place with good feng shui. Because of the end of the world, this place was deserted. When Xiaoqing passed by the cemetery, she took a look. Many graves had been dug up, and there were white bones on the side. They were probably eaten by the beasts in the mountain. The construction of the cemetery was very grand, but the cemetery in Yan Hanqing's village was much colder. They were all small mounds and the rows were not neat. Yan Hanqing quickly found his father's grave and knelt in front of it. "Father, I'm back." Yan Hanqing suddenly remembered that a long time ago, he had told his mother, "It doesn't matter. I will protect you on behalf of my father." However, he didn't do it. Yan Hanqing's mother's body was well preserved. Except for a layer of frost, it looked like she was still alive. Yan Hanqing dug the grave bit by bit with his bare hands. After nearly dying once, his body's tenacity and other aspects had become a lot stronger. Xiaoqing and the others didn't help Yan Hanqing. They just watched him dig up the grave, because everyone knew that Yan Hanqing needed to vent. This was the best way. There was only an urn in the coffin. Yan Hanqing put his mother in it, and then put the urn on his mother's chest. After looking at it for a long time, he slowly closed the coffin and buried it. Finally, Yan Hanqing knelt in front of the tombstone, and used a military knife to carve his mother's name on the tombstone, side by side with his father's name. At that moment, Xiaoqing felt that Yan Hanqing's back had collapsed. She could imagine how Yan Hanqing had carried his mother on his back, and struggled to survive in the end of the world. Finally, he saw hope, but his mother should be all his hope and motivation. That was why Yan Hanqing was so lost when he buried his mother. The lost Yan Hanqing looked at Xiaoqing, and then he slowly calmed down, as if he had a goal to live on. Xiaoqing always felt that people like Yan Hanqing lived too tirelessly. His whole life was lived for others. Thinking about it carefully, wasn't she the same? Wasn't it her family that supported her to live on? "Let's go." Yan Hanqing looked at his palm. The fingertips that had been scraped by digging up the grave had already healed. That kind of strange recovery speed was almost comparable to air dye. "Let's stay here for 2 days." Xiaoqing shook her head. "I saw that many graves in the nearby cemetery were dug up, and the corpses were dragged out and eaten. I'm worried that there might be some beasts nearby. In case, we should stay and observe." Yan Hanqing looked at Xiaoqing and the others with some gratitude. He was a little embarrassed that they kept delaying because of him, but he wouldn't say thank you out loud. He would remember this friendship in his heart. "Let's go to my house first," Yan Hanqing suggested. "My house is just beside the village, so it's convenient to come and go." "Okay." Xiaoqing nodded and led the group in the direction of Yan Hanqing's house. The single-story houses here were all in the courtyard, which was what the local dialect called the patio. They were covered with stainless steel covers, plastic films in winter, and gauze nets in summer to prevent mosquitoes, rain, and snow. Yan Hanqing's house was the same, so they couldn't climb the wall without the key. They could only open the door by force. Gu Panpan wanted to open the door by force, but she was stopped by Gu Chuan. He took a military knife and cut the lock. The house had been empty for a long time, so dust and cobwebs were everywhere. When the door was opened, the dust flew up arrogantly. The few of them covered their mouths and noses and walked in. "Mom used to plant some vegetables in the courtyard, but we took them away when she left." Yan Hanqing recalled the past and smiled. They walked into the courtyard and saw a few wilted vegetables standing crookedly on the piece of land in the middle of the courtyard that had been set aside for planting. They actually grew again. Gu Ponpon's eyes widened and she clapped her hands. Let's cook the vegetables tonight. Xiaoqing pushed open the door to the central room. Don't just focus on eating. Let's settle down and assign who to look after the cemetery tonight. Chapter 48. Then everyone looked at Dai in unison. Dai looked at the group of people in a daze. As something seemed wrong, Xiaoqing touched Dai's head and said, "Then it's decided." Then Dai was sold just like that. He was still in a daze. Xiaoqing immediately said, "Hurry up and cook. We'll start work after dinner." Yan Hanqing immediately went to cook. Xiaoqing looked at Dai, then at Yan Hanqing, and finally at Little Bun. She immediately felt that she was a winner in life. Before dinner was finished, Xiaoqing sat in the yard and watched Little Bun learn to walk with Xiaotong's help. She suddenly felt that someone was sneakily peeping outside. Xiaoqing's vigilance immediately went up. Ever since the last incident, Xiaoqing felt like she was about to become a bird that was startled by the twang of a bough. She listened carefully. The breathing was heavy, and the footsteps were not well hidden. It was not a professional. It should be a living person. Xiaoqing thought carefully. Thin vines slowly crept out like snakes. After a while there was a scream outside. Xiaoqing quickly kicked the door open. Then she saw two skinny people lying outside the door, tied up tightly by vines. The two people, a man and a woman, looked to be in their 40s or 50s. Their expressions were very frightened. Both of them were so thin that they looked like two skeletons. Don't kill us." The woman screamed and said in horror, I know Yan Hanqing. That young man is Yan Hanqing, right?" Xiaoqing put down her raised hand silently. "Who are you? Why are you sneaking around here?" The man immediately said, "We are residents of the village. In terms of seniority, Hanqing has to call me uncle." The woman immediately echoed, Yes. I saw you enter the village just now. I saw someone who looked like Hanqing, so I came to have a look. I don't mean anything else." Xiaoqing narrowed her eyes slightly. She did not immediately believe their words. Instead, she immediately called Yan Hanqing over. Yan Hanqing had just finished cooking 2 dishes. He was still smelling of oil and smoke. He hurried over. "What's wrong?" When the two people saw Yan Hanqing, they shouted happily, "Nephew, it's me and your aunt." Yan Hanqing's face was a little cold. However, he always looked serious, so ordinary people could not see it. Xiaoqing was always observant, so she could see that Yan Hanqing's temperature had dropped at a glance. The two men were still shouting, "Eldest nephew, hurry up and ask her to let us go. Don't forget that when your father died, we were the ones who helped your family. If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have been able to grow up to this age." Yan Hanqing looked at Xiaoqing awkwardly. Xiaoqing took back the vines. The two people got up and patted the dust off their bodies. The woman said, "We're all on the same side. Is this my niece-in-law? She's so beautiful." Yan Hanqing looked at Xiaoqing awkwardly, and then said, "What's the matter?" As soon as he said this, the woman's face sank. She smelled the aroma of food and said, "Hanqing, what do you mean? Don't you recognize your relatives at this time? Now your uncle and I are starving to death. Even if you don't remember that we're relatives, you have to remember that we helped you at that time, right?" Yan Hanqing pursed his lips. He was very embarrassed. Xiaoqing pulled him and said, "Since you're Hanqing's relatives, then come in. Although we don't have much food, we can still afford a meal." The two people immediately walked in happily. Xiaoqing greeted them in advance, and Dai hid in the house. Gu Panpan also brought out the dishes and some dry food. Yan Hanqing returned to the kitchen and finished the unfinished dishes. Then the two people consciously sat down at the table. One of them took a few packs of compressed biscuits and stuffed them into his pocket. The other took a piece of biscuit and stuffed it into the woman's mouth while eating. They didn't even use chopsticks. They grabbed the food with their hands and stuffed it into their mouths. Especially the plate of bacon, which was eaten in a short while. When Yan Hanqing came out with the dishes, he saw the two of them gobbling up the food on the table. His originally ugly face became even colder. When the woman saw Yan Hanqing, she waved her hand. "Hanqing, hurry up and bring it over. The dishes are running out." Xiaoqing gave Yan Hanqing a look. Yan Hanqing silently brought the dishes to the table. The two people ate 4 servings of food. In the end, they patted their round bellies and didn't forget to stuff food into their pockets. Not to mention Yan Hanqing, even the onlookers couldn't stand it. If it weren't for Xiaoqing stopping her, Gu Panpan would have mocked them. The woman was also thick-skinned. When she saw that there was nothing left on the table, she said, I'm sorry. It's all eaten. Did you cook less food? You are Hanqing's relatives. It's nothing to eat some food, but we have to rest. Xiaoqing's intention to drive them away was very obvious. The woman didn't seem to hear it and kept looking into the room. Yan Hanqing couldn't help but say, Auntie, the sun is going down. If there's anything, let's talk about it another day. No, what if you leave next day? Hanqing, Auntie, I have something to discuss with you. Look, you came back from outside. You must have brought a lot of food, right? Your uncle and I helped you a lot in the past, didn't we? Just for the sake of returning the favor, you should give us a few bags of food, right? We don't ask for much. A dozen bags will be enough. Don't tell us that you don't have any. How can such little food be compared to the food we saved in the past? Yan Hanqing lowered his voice and said, Auntie, I really don't have that much. The woman immediately opened her eyes wide. She was already skinny. Chapter 49. In fact, Xiaoqing had already reached out her hand, but when she saw Erdai's innocent eyes, she felt like she was touching an underage boy. She coughed and took her hand back. However, Erdai didn't want to. He seemed to think that Xiaoqing didn't like him, so he took Xiaoqing's hand and put it on his thigh. Xiaoqing felt that she seemed to have led Erdai astray. Seeing Xiaoqing take her hand back, Erdai lowered his head slightly and lowered his eyelids. His long eyelashes fluttered, making him look very pitiful. Xiaoqing's heart softened at once. She hugged Erdai to show that she still liked him very much. Erdai was a little happier. Nothing happened that night. When Xiaoqing took Erdai back, she happened to see the couple at the door. They were stopped by the man-eating flower she put at the door. When the couple saw Xiaoqing, they were surprised and said, Niece-in-law, quickly get rid of this strange flower. However, Xiaoqing and Erdai didn't even look at them. They went straight into the house, which made the couple stomp their feet angrily. They stayed there for 3 days, but they didn't see any wild animals coming to dig the grave. However, the couple came almost every day, shouting that they wanted to see Yan Hanqing, but no one paid them any attention. On the 4th day, Xiaoqing said, Let's go. I need to verify something. Since Xiaoqing said so, no one objected. They packed up and were ready to leave. When they left, the couple came again. If you want to leave, take us with you. Even if you don't take us with you, leave some food. Yan Hanqing, you can't be so heartless. The woman stomped her feet and said. Xiaoqing put down the glass and poked her head out. What were you talking about just now? Her eyes suddenly turned a seductive dark red, and the angle of her smile was somewhat strange. Especially on her pale face, it seemed even more frightening. Little Baozi poked his head out from Xiaoqing's shoulder. His eyes were dark and hollow, and when he opened his mouth, his sharp canine teeth were exposed. The creepiness of the mother and son increased rapidly. The couple couldn't help but shudder. When they looked at Xiaoqing again, their eyes were full of fear. Satisfied, Xiaoqing retracted back into the car. She stepped on the accelerator and sped off. Only when they were far away from the village did Xiaoqing park the car in the woods. When night falls, I will go back with Hanqing to take a look. Pan, you guys watch over the children. Gu Pan asked worriedly. Should we bring my brother along? No, this trip won't be dangerous, but it might take a long time. I estimate that I will stay there for about 3 days. It will be more troublesome for you guys to take care of the children. Xiaoqing shook her head and closed her eyes to rest in the car. When the sun set, she got out of the car with Yan Hanqing. Erdai insisted on following them, so they had no choice but to go with them. They quietly returned to the cemetery. The cemetery was surrounded by woods, so it was easy to hide. Xiaoqing sat on a branch and said to Yan Hanqing, Wait. At most 3 days the results I want may come out. Yan Hanqing didn't say anything. He felt that his life already belonged to Xiaoqing. No matter what Xiaoqing said or did, he wouldn't raise any objections. Even if one day Xiaoqing wanted to kill him, he would probably only stretch out his neck. Yan Hanqing was thinking. Suddenly he was pushed. Then he saw Dai grinning at him fiercely, and then squeezed between him and Xiaoqing. The branch was thicker, so it was easy for 2 people to sit there, but it was very crowded for 3 people. Yan Hanqing was about to be pushed to the thinner part of the branch. Xiaoqing had no choice but to hold Dai in her arms. Dai's body was slender but thin. He fit perfectly in Xiaoqing's arms, but his long legs were dangling. Fortunately, he was hanging in the air. Dai had a fierce look, but once he was held in Xiaoqing's arms, the whole zombie became gentle and obedient. If zombies didn't blush, his ears might have turned red. Don't move or else we'll be the ones falling. Xiaoqing couldn't help but tighten her arms around Dai's waist. Dai's thin waist was very nice to touch, but it was too little meat. Xiaoqing couldn't help but sigh. If Dai was a normal teenager, she might not be able to control herself and become a beast. She would definitely feed Dai until he was white and fat. Every day, she would press him on the bed and eat him. After all, this was an obedient and handsome teenager who was dead set on her. The key word was teenager. That's right, as a girl with a boy toy, she had no principles. Dai didn't know Xiaoqing's thoughts at all. If he knew, he would probably wash himself clean, strip naked, and climb onto Xiaoqing's bed. Xiaoqing, who felt that she still had some principles, remembered that there was still Yan Hanqing beside her. She coughed and pretended to be serious. We have to pay attention to whether there's any movement. Yan Hanqing nodded and looked at the sky. The sun set very quickly. At the moment there was no trace of sunlight. The dark clouds were like a black curtain, completely covering the moon. I'll keep watch. You have a good rest. Let me do it. I'm not sleepy. You should rest well. Nothing should happen tonight. Thanks to the strange body, Xiaoqing's night vision became very strong. She sat on a tree branch and could even see the words on the tombstones at the edge of the cemetery. She couldn't see anything further. Yan Hanqing was very determined. Let me do it. I've slept a lot these 2 days, so I don't feel like sleeping at night. Xiaoqing thought about it and said, how about this? I'll be in charge of the first half of the night, and you watch the second half of the night. Dai pulled Xiaoqing's sleeve discontentedly. Xiaoqing immediately changed her mind. Dai and I will watch the first half of the night, and you watch the second half of the night. Dai was satisfied. Yan Hanqing also knew that with Xiaoqing's temper, it was impossible for her to let him watch the whole night alone. So he nodded and leaned against the tree trunk to rest. At midnight he could take over Xiaoqing's shift. Sure enough, nothing happened for the first 2 days. Until the night of the 3rd day, 2 black figures suddenly appeared in the cemetery. Chapter 50. When the 2 shadows appeared, Yan Hanqing was about to take over the shift. The 3 of them were very awake. When they saw the strange shadows appear, the 3 of them quickly became alert. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She just made a hand gesture. Dai and Yan Hanqing immediately flanked them from the left and right. Xiaoqing quietly crept closer and heard the conversation between the 2 of them. A woman's voice said, "Anyway, they have left. Why are we still here in the middle of the night? I feel a little scared. Why don't we come again tomorrow?" Immediately another man's voice sounded. "Do you think we are doing something glamorous? Come in the day. Hurry up and dig and leave. Don't waste time. Who are you scolding? Don't talk about it. I think it's scary at night." The woman lowered her voice and said, "That slut seduced the village chief and took all the money. Not a cent fell into our hands. Now we are peeling her skin and gnawing on her bones. This is her retribution." The man laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and dig. I haven't eaten meat for a long time. The graveyard next to us is also empty. We have to think about what to do in the future. That little turtle, when he left, he didn't leave us anything to eat. I think he is most likely a gigolo. Didn't you see how much he listened to that little girl? Like mother, like son." As soon as the woman's voice fell, Yan Hanqing couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up with red eyes and looked at the couple as if he was looking at dead people. The two of them were shocked. They raised the shovels in their hands, but when they saw that it was Yan Hanqing, they suddenly felt guilty. Big nephew, didn't you leave? The woman stuttered. Yan Hanqing looked at the couple with cold eyes and said coldly, if I leave, I'm afraid that even my mother's body will be ruined by you heartless things. Yan Hanqing had never cursed in his life, but this time he really couldn't help it. To be honest, half of the blood in his body was the same as the man in front of him, but this person could be so cruel as to rob the money of the widow and the orphan. This money was the compensation for his father's death. Anyone with a bit of conscience wouldn't do such a thing. What's more, in the end, they didn't even plan to let go of his mother's corpse. Those filthy words made him burn with anger. Yan Hanqing had also thought that no matter what, this couple was his last family in this world. So even if they had done all kinds of bad things, Yan Hanqing was not prepared to deal with them. However, they had stepped on Yan Hanqing's bottom line. They shouldn't have done anything to Yan Hanqing's mother. This is my mother's grave. I didn't want to see blood in front of her grave. I didn't want to let her live peacefully down there. Yan Hanqing seemed to be talking to himself. The man was trembling in fear. He knew very well that Yan Hanqing had been a soldier and had seen blood. If the couple went up together, they might even die. Hanqing, what do you want to do? I'm your uncle. Yes, Hanqing, what nonsense are you talking about? We're just here to add soil to your mother's grave. The woman hurriedly said. It's very late. Xiaoqing quietly appeared not far behind Yan Hanqing and said faintly, Hanqing, take air dye and go back first. I'll take care of this. Yan Hanqing knew that Xiaoqing was worried that he would be traumatized if he did something to his family. So she asked him to leave with air dye and let Xiaoqing deal with these two people. However, Yan Hanqing shook his head and said faintly, I'll do it. What do you want to do? The woman screamed. As her voice fell, the man suddenly stabbed the shovel into Yan Hanqing's neck. It seemed that he was going to make the first move. Xiaoqing didn't even look twice. She took air dye's hand and left. If he couldn't even deal with two ordinary people, was Yan Hanqing still the Yan Hanqing? She wasn't worried at all. After leaving the cemetery, Xiaoqing couldn't help but chuckle. They chose a good place. At least they won't die without a burial place. After about 2 minutes, Yan Hanqing came out. There was still the smell of blood on his body. It wasn't very strong, but to Xiaoqing it was very clear. Dealt with. Xiaoqing turned around and saw Yan Hanqing silently take out a cigarette. After a long time he couldn't find a lighter. In the end, he just held the cigarette between his fingers and didn't smoke. They don't deserve to be buried in the Yan family's ancestral grave. Yan Hanqing said coldly. He didn't say how he dealt with the two people. Xiaoqing also didn't ask. The three people strolled in the direction of the car. She knew that Yan Hanqing must be feeling bad. He was a very loyal and honest man. He was like a mountain, silent and reliable. This kind of man was usually very affectionate, whether it was family or kindness. Although the two people were not good, they were still his family in the end. They were his last family in this world. Xiaoqing knew that Yan Hanqing would be depressed for a while at most, and then he would bury everything in his heart. This man looked silent and cold, but in fact, he was already out of breath from the pressure. She could tell that Yan Hanqing did not smoke before. His smoking posture was clumsy and immature, and his knuckles did not have any traces of smoking due to years of smoking. He must have developed the habit of smoking after the apocalypse. This man had too many responsibilities. He wouldn't let himself relax. Xiaoqing always felt that she wasn't the kind of person who had a glib tongue. After meeting Yan Hanqing, she couldn't help but enlighten him again and again. Are you still sad? Yan Hanqing shook his head. There was some confusion in his eyes. Soon, when he looked at Xiaoqing, his eyes became clear. Chapter 51. It was said that nature was very cruel. Only the fittest survived. Just like the giraffes with short necks, they were gradually eliminated because they could not eat enough food or failed to find a mate. The remaining ones were all giraffes with long necks. Now, the ones eliminated by nature were ordinary people. Zombies were slowly evolving and so were superpowered people. Only ordinary people stayed in the same place. Sooner or later, the number of ordinary people would gradually decrease because of various reasons. Then, in order to adapt to the environment, most of the newborns would be superpowered people. Maybe there would be only superpowered people left in the world. Xiaoqing was shocked by her own imagination. She felt that her imagination was likely to come true. If it went on like this, maybe one day the world would become what Xiaoqing thought it would be. The return trip was faster than when they had come. Even though they had spent most of their time hunting zombies, the time they returned was much earlier than they had expected. The closer they got to the base, the more worried Xiaoqing was. The air dye was too weak. It was very difficult to disguise as a normal person and enter the base. However, she couldn't leave the air dye outside. The more she thought about it, the more worried Xiaoqing became. They were a search team that had just returned to the base. Superpowered people didn't need to go through the observation period, but superpowered people from outside had to go through the inspection. What's more, the air dye couldn't disguise as a superpowered person. If they really wanted to disguise, they could only disguise as a superpowered person with speed or strength. However, during the physical examination, Dummy was still easily exposed. Xiaoqing was so worried that she had a headache. She didn't dare to take Dummy to have a try. If Dummy's identity was discovered, she would walk into a trap and be caught like a turtle in a jar. Xiaoqing wanted to let the air dye wait outside. But when she saw the air dye's ignorant and dependent eyes, she couldn't say anything. What was the difference between leaving the air dye outside and abandoning it? After thinking about it, Xiaoqing finally came up with an idea when they were about to arrive at the base. This survivor base was the largest one in the area. So many people came to seek shelter every day. There was a long line outside the base. Xiaoqing and the others got out of the car outside the gate and handed the car over to the inspector before walking inside. As paranormals of the base, Xiaoqing and the others naturally didn't need to line up. They could directly enter after flashing their badges. Yan Hanqing, on the other hand, had to be tested. "Sister Qing, you're back?" The young man working at the reception desk said enthusiastically. His special ability was related to his sense of smell, which was not very useful in combat, so he was arranged to receive the special ability users coming in and out. "Well, my teammates awakened their superpowers during the battle. I also brought back 2 of my relatives who are also superpowered." Xiaoqing said, "Where should we go for the test?" The teenager immediately looked envious. There were also some ordinary people who suddenly awakened their abilities in dangerous situations. These awakened abilities were often more useful, unlike him. "Just test it inside." Xiaoqing nodded and led the others in. The young man saw that there were 2 girls following behind Xiaoqing. They didn't look old, and they were both timid and good-looking. One of them was taller and looked dull, while the other was younger and looked a little panicked. The person in charge of recording was a man in his 30s. His ability was very special. He could detect the fluctuations of a special ability and analyze its strength and type. So he was arranged to record the special abilities. "A newcomer?" The man looked up and saw Xiaoqing. His eyes softened a lot. After all, it was rare to see a young, beautiful, and female superpowered person. As a man, he was very tolerant of young, beautiful, and most importantly, single female superpowered people like Xiaoqing. "My teammates awakened their superpowers during the battle, so I came to record it. And my 2 cousins." Xiaoqing asked Yan Hanqing to come forward first. The man was surprised and said, "Release your superpowers first." Yan Hanqing raised his hand and a small bolt of lightning flashed in his palm. "Lightning ability. Not bad. It's at level 1. The man quickly recorded Yan Hanqing's basic information, then gave Yan Hanqing a badge that represented a superpowered person. Yan Hanqing stood aside. Xiaoqing held Xiaotong's hand and said, "This is my cousin Xiaotong. She's 12 years old. Her superpower is mental. Her name is Tong." Xiaotong released her superpower when her name was called. She couldn't control her superpower very well, but she could still control it freely. Level 1 mental. It's very rare. It's even rarer than the lightning ability. The man's eyes were full of surprise. He recorded Xiaotong's information again. The last one to step forward was air dye. He was wearing a knee-length skirt, and his face was very delicate with makeup. He held Xiaoqing's hand tightly and looked very scared. Xiaoqing had to explain, "This is my cousin Xiao Yang. He's not in good spirits because he had been, alas, that kind of bad thing. Then he had some mental problems. He always thinks that he's a girl, so he doesn't dare to interact with strangers." The man looked at Dai with sympathy, and then he suddenly understood. Xiaoqing continued, "He's a strength-type superpowered person. He just awakened his superpower." Xiaoqing nodded and signaled Dai to show it to the man. Dai reached out his finger and poked a hole in the marble table. Yes, he poked a hole. The man was dumbfounded. He had seen many strength-type superpowered people, but it was the first time he saw someone like Dai, who could poke a hole in the marble table with pure physical strength. He moved too fast. I didn't catch the fluctuation of his superpower at all. He's a level 1 superpowered person. Can you release it again? Xiaoqing lowered her voice and asked gently. Dai shyly hid behind Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing said embarrassedly, "He's too shy. You see, it's the same." The man waved his hand and quickly recorded Dai's information. On the one hand, he felt that an ordinary person could poke a hole in the marble table with his finger. On the other hand, beautiful girls always needed special treatment. He should give Xiaoqing some special treatment. Maybe, Xiaoqing thought he was a good person and wanted to marry him or something. "Thank you very much. I'll treat you to a meal when I'm free." Xiaoqing smiled and left with a group of people. As soon as they left the testing area, Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief. She finally got through. As long as Dai was successfully registered as a superpowered person in the base, he would be able to enter and leave freely without worrying about being discovered. Xiaoqing was in a much better mood than she had expected. "Pan, you guys wait here for the wind. After the car passes the inspection, we can drive it back. Hanqing and I will go back to cook first. Let's eat dinner together." Chapter 52. Dummy Dai put on makeup and changed into a girl's clothes. She really looked like a cute little girl and she was very good looking. Those passers-by couldn't help but look at Xiaoqing, Xiaotong and Dai. However, they didn't dare to do that, especially when they saw the badges on Xiaoqing's chests. Hanging in Xiaoqing's arms, Baozi looked around secretly. Finally, he whispered pitifully in Xiaoqing's ear, "Mama, are they going to eat us? Why do you say that?" Xiaoqing glanced around, and all the obscene or overt lustful gazes disappeared. Most of the people here were superpowered people. Few ordinary people dared to look at a superpowered person with such a gaze. But even superpowered people couldn't help lowering their heads when they met Xiaoqing's cold eyes with hidden killing intent. Because the way they look at us is very scary. Little Bun's eyes widened, full of doubt. Xiaoqing touched Baozi's head. "Baby, you're wrong. There is no such thing." Baozi looked around again. Indeed, those obscene eyes were gone. Xiaoqing held Baozi and went back to her home with Dai, Xiaotong and Yan Hanqing. The house next to Xiaoqing's was indeed empty. When they started to cook, Yan Hanqing went through the formalities and moved into the house next to Xiaoqing's. And they were ready to officially establish their superpowered team. There were many search teams in the base, but only a team with more than 5 superpowered people could be called an official superpowered team. The others could only be called a search team. Xiaoqing's team now had more than 5 superpowered people. It was reasonable for them to establish a superpowered team. After all, a superpowered team was much better than an ordinary search team, and they needed to hand in less materials. After dinner, Xiaoqing was ready to take Yan Hanqing and others to register the superpowered team. The dinner was very rich, celebrating their safe return. Although the trip was dangerous, they didn't have any casualties. Yan Hanqing awakened his superpower, and Xiaotong joined them. Could be said that it was double happiness. After dinner, they went to register the superpower team together. The registration place was the place where tasks were handed in. They bypassed the front desk and entered the studio. There was a baby-faced but big-breasted girl who was in charge of registration. She lazily raised her head and glanced at Xiaoqing and the others. When she saw that they were all ability users, she perked up. Are you here to accept a mission? No, we're going to set up a superpowered team. Xiaoqing glanced at the girl's breasts and instantly looked away. The girl opened the registration book and asked, "Then what's the name of your superpowered team?" Xiao, bad at naming, Qing was a bit confused at that time. She was a person who could name people. No, zombies, this kind of name trash. What kind of good name could she come up with? Xiaoqing turned to look at her teammates expressionlessly. Yan Hanqing silently lowered his head. Gu Chuan also turned his head. Gu Panpan looked blank, and Air Dai didn't even need to look at them. The whole team was bad at naming. Was it true that birds of a feather flock together? Xiaoqing couldn't help but feel a little desperate. She glanced at the big-breasted girl who had been waiting for a long time with a pen in her hand. She thought for a moment and said, "Can we call it the superpowered team?" The big-breasted girl was speechless. If being bad at naming was considered a disability, Xiaoqing was definitely at level 6. Then sonorous rose? Xiaoqing couldn't help but think of a certain TV series and shamelessly decided to use this name. However, the big-breasted girl said seriously, "I'm sorry, this name is already used by someone." Then, "Together under the wind and rain?" "I'm sorry, this name is already used by someone." "Godslayer." "I'm sorry, this name is already used by someone." After thinking of more than 10 names, Xiaoqing felt a little exhausted and a little irritable. Why was thinking of a name more tiring than killing a bunch of zombies? What about Baby Meng? Don't tell me that this name is already used by someone. No, congratulations on the success of your superpowered team. The big-breasted girl smiled, but she was complaining in her heart. Who would call themselves Baby Meng's superpowered team? It sounded cowardly, okay? It would be weird if someone used this name. No objections? Xiaoqing turned around and saw a bunch of hairy heads nodding like chickens pecking at rice. Gu Panpan said very flatteringly, "I think this name is pretty good. It sounds very cute." "Then who is the captain?" The big-breasted girl resisted the urge to complain and asked. Gu Panpan immediately said, "Xiaoqing, the captain is Xiaoqing." Gu Panpan's meaning naturally represented her expressionless brother, and Yan Hanqing naturally supported Xiaoqing. As for Air Dai, there was no need to ask. "I'm the captain, Vice-Captain Gu Chuan." Xiaoqing didn't refuse and nodded. After recording some basic information, the big-breasted girl said, "Your team is officially established. It's now a level 1 superpowered team. You can take missions in the hall outside, and you'll get points for completing them. With more points, you can be promoted to a high-level superpowered team, and you'll get better benefits." "Thank you." Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief. Forcing her to give a name was simply asking for her life. After completing this, they could go out and take missions. Many missions were only open to official superpowered teams. Xiaoqing went outside and looked through the mission list. She saw many missions that required the purchase of high-level zombie crystals. It seemed that the existence and function of zombie crystals were indeed known to the whole world. After directly ignoring the missions that required the purchase of zombie crystal nuclei, Xiaoqing's eyes skipped over a bunch of simple missions that didn't have any good rewards. Her eyes fell on a very obvious one. Level 2 or below, no missions that didn't have at least 3 level 2 superpowered members in the team. In the mission hall, apart from some of the missions issued by the base, some of them were issued by people in the base. For example, this mission was issued by the base at first glance. According to the mission, a lot of confidential information was stored in the municipal building in the city center. Some of it was about the purification of water resources, which was originally intended to be submitted to the capital. After the apocalypse, most of the water resources exposed to the Earth's surface were heavily polluted, and some of them were contaminated by the zombie virus. Even if the water was boiled, no one dared to drink it. If they could get that information and let the researchers study it, they might be able to find a way to purify water resources. For others, this mission was extremely difficult, but for Xiaoqing it couldn't be any easier. Don't forget, ordinary zombies wouldn't attack her. She could enter and exit the zombie-dense city as if she was entering a no-man's land. Chapter 53. The eyes of Gu Panpan and the others who knew the inside story also lit up. because the reward for this task was too good. There were villas, food, and zombie crystal nuclei. Even their team of paranormals could rise by one level immediately. They would be idiots if they didn't accept it. Xiaoqing flipped through the mission list and accepted 3 missions that required them to go to the city. Of course, the most important one was still the mission of searching for information. The girl in charge of recording looked sweet. She said worriedly, "Are you sure you want to accept this mission? Although it's recommended that a team above level 2 try this mission, even a level 3 team wouldn't dare to accept it alone." Xiaoqing nodded. "Yes. Okay then." Seeing that she couldn't persuade them, the girl had no choice but to record it down. After all, she couldn't stop them from going to their deaths, right? Meng Bao's team, right? The girl who said this name suddenly felt an indescribable sense of shame. She felt that she was going to be embarrassed. However, Xiaoqing said with a serious face yes. The girl hurriedly recorded it down, then said to Xiaoqing, "This is a joint mission. A team has already accepted this mission. Please gather at the square tomorrow afternoon." Okay. Xiaoqing frowned. It was quite unfavorable for them to work with others. After all, there were 3 abnormal people in their team, especially Dai, who was particularly easy to be exposed. If she was exposed, there would only be 2 endings. Either she would kill all the other team members and silence them, or they would have to escape from this base. Once they were forced to escape, they might not be able to enter large or medium-sized bases in the future. After all, zombies that could sneak into a base would definitely alert the base and send out something like a wanted poster to alert other bases. Then, in the future, other than those small and messy bases that couldn't be any smaller, they really had nowhere else to go. Therefore, Xiaoqing made up her mind. She couldn't let Dai participate in this task, but she was still worried about leaving Dai at home. After all, the base was huge and there were all kinds of people. It was possible that some of them had their eyes on Dai's beauty and wanted to take advantage of her absence to make a move. If something happened and Dai's identity was exposed, she probably wouldn't even have a chance to escape in this huge base. Xiaoqing was worried. But in the end, she thought that there must be a way when the car reaches the mountain. If there was no other way, she could take Dummy with her and not let him fight along the way. The whole family went back to pack up and then waited for tomorrow to go on a mission together. According to the girl in the mission hall, the team that had accepted the mission was one of the only 3 level 3 teams in the base. In order for a team of ability users to level up, they had to meet 2 conditions. First, they had to have enough points. Second, there had to be at least 1 ability user in the team who had reached the required level. For example, in order to level up a team of ability users to level up, there had to be at least 1 level 3 ability user in the team. Many level 2 teams in the base had enough points to level up, but they lacked a level 3 ability user. Level 3 ability users were really rare. In this huge base, the number of level 3 ability users could be counted on one hand. Take Xiaoqing as an example. She had discovered zombie crystal nuclei and strange energy crystals long ago. But even so, she was still only a level 3 ability user. However, Xiaoqing was confident that even 3 level 3 ability users wouldn't be able to defeat her. Besides, Yan Hanqing was about to level up to level 2. A level 2 lightning ability user wasn't much weaker than a level 3 ability user. In addition, Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan were both at the peak of level 2, and Xiao Tong, who had absorbed the spirit zombie crystal and reached level 2. Even without Dai, their fighting strength was absolutely top-notch. Moreover, there was Dai, a zombie who wasn't much weaker than Xiaoqing. It was just that he was a little silly. In fact, the little bun also had some fighting strength, just a little bit. In short, the level of their team couldn't be used to estimate their fighting strength. That level 3 ability user team might not be able to defeat Xiaoqing's team in a real fight. In this world where strength spoke louder than words, they were very confident. The next afternoon, when it was time, they packed up and went to the meeting place. When they arrived, the team of paranormals called Storm was already waiting there. They had a total of 6 paranormals, and the leader was a young man with a smile on his face. He seemed to be easy to get along with, but if you looked closely, you would find that his eyes were indifferent. There was another person who attracted Xiaoqing's attention. That was a young woman standing beside the man. She was about 30 years old and dressed very provocatively. She had wavy curls and flaming red lips. She had a curvy figure and looked very sexy. Xiaoqing didn't even take a second look at the others. When Xiaoqing led Yan Hanqing and the others over, the man walked over with a smile and reached out his hand to Gu Chuan. It's an honor to cooperate with you. I'm Lin Xiaofeng, and this is our vice captain Chang Jiao. The beautiful woman immediately walked over and winked at Gu Chuan. Gu Chuan acted as if he didn't see it. After a short silence, he said concisely, Gu Chuan, our captain Xiaoqing. Lin Xiaofeng immediately felt a little embarrassed. He said bluntly, I'm sorry. After all, there are too few female captains. Miss Xiao, you're really a woman. Xiaoqing smiled and said, Captain. They're just doing me a favor. Captain Lin, you're joking. They complimented each other again. During this time, Chang Jiao's eyes seemed to be glued to Gu Chuan and Yan Hanqing. Especially when she looked at Yan Hanqing, she was so hot. After a short negotiation, Xiaoqing and Lin Xiaofeng reached a consensus. Xiaoqing didn't think that they could cooperate well with the Gale Squad. It was enough that they didn't drag each other down. Lin Xiaofeng probably thought so too. After all, their team looked relatively weak, especially Er Dai and Xiao Tong, who looked like two minors. Xiao Tong was holding Baozi in her arms, which made her look more like a little nanny. After reaching a consensus, the two teams set off. Seeing that Xiao Tong was about to get in the car with Baozi, Lin Xiaofeng couldn't help but ask, Captain Xiao, did you forget to send the child back first? Xiaoqing glanced at Baozi and said frankly, I always take my son with me when I go on a mission. Otherwise, I'll be worried. My son is very obedient. He won't drag us down. Immediately, some people snickered and whispered to each other. The specific meaning was that anyone could form a squad with superpowers. How could she take a child to complete a mission? She must be crazy. Lin Xiaofeng didn't think so. Those who dared to take a child on a mission were either idiots or had the confidence and strength to ensure that their child wouldn't get hurt. Xiaoqing didn't look like an idiot. The only thing that looked like an idiot was the name of their team. Chapter 54. The two paranormal squads packed up and left the base. Off-road vehicles were especially popular after the apocalypse due to their performance and other reasons. However, ordinary people couldn't afford them because they consumed a lot of fuel. Every time they went out, they had to prepare several barrels of fuel in the car. Otherwise, they would have to leave the car halfway. Fuel was very expensive in the base, and it was very dangerous to find it in the city. Therefore, over time, off-road vehicles became the vehicles that only paranormal squads could afford. 2 paranormal squads and 4 off-road vehicles drove out one after the other. It was quite a spectacular scene. Many people who were waiting in line at the entrance of the base saw it. In fact, this scene was quite pretentious. However, some curious people asked the name of Xiaoqing's paranormal squad. After that, their expressions became very strange. Xiaoqing's team naturally didn't know that there was a long distance between the base and the destination city. The 2 squads discussed for a while and decided not to go too fast. They wanted to avoid arriving at the city at night. In other words, they would rest in the wild for a night. The journey was very smooth. Occasionally there were a few scattered zombies, but they were easily dealt with. Fierce Wind seemed to have a competitive mentality. Every time a zombie appeared, they would quickly take action and use all kinds of abilities to deal with the zombies. They probably wanted to show Xiaoqing's team how powerful they were. However, Xiaoqing's team didn't attack. They were playing Do Diju in the backseat of the car. The main members were Gu Panpan, Gu Chuan, and Yan Hanqing. The rest of them were sleeping soundly. They didn't feel provoked at all. Of course, their indifference had been regarded as weakness by Fierce Wind's members. Then, the weak team of 7 wandered all the way until the afternoon. When the sun went down, they had to set up camp. After all, the 2 squads weren't familiar with each other, so they set up their tents separately. While the Fierce Wind Paranormal Squad was setting up their tents, Xiaoqing's team suddenly came out with a pile of bamboo poles and surrounded the 3 tents like a fence. Immediately, some people laughed secretly. What could a few bamboo poles stop? Stop the rabbit? Then they saw Xiaoqing walk out and touch one of the bamboo poles. Tender green vines started from Xiaoqing's palm, and with a swoosh, 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 swoosh. What can a few vines block? A member of the storm team mumbled as he reached out his hand. It looked like he wanted to touch the sprout. Just as he touched the vine, it coiled around his wrist like a snake looking for food and continued to extend up his arm. He let out a blood-curdling scream, and his entire body went limp as if he had lost all his bones. Only his arm was hanging by the vines, and it looked particularly strange. Xiaoqing gently touched the vines, and the vines obediently let go of the man. Only then did they see that the man's arm had turned black. Lin Xiaofeng's expression changed as well. Captain Xiao, it's my team member's fault for being reckless. Please show mercy and give him the antidote. Don't worry. The poison hasn't been injected into his body. It's just the poison on the surface of the vines that has infected his arm. He'll be fine after washing it, but he might be paralyzed for a night. Xiaoqing had long been prepared for this kind of situation, so the vines served as a warning. If the intruder was a living creature, a little bit of poison would be enough to paralyze it. If it was a zombie, it would also wake her up. This was also the reason why she didn't stop that person when he reached out his hand towards the vines. Although she thought that she had a good temper, it didn't mean that she would let others bully her. Those people's whispers weren't soft, and she heard them clearly. Xiaoqing was not a saint, and it was reasonable for her to teach them a lesson. After all, people should be responsible for their own words. The people of Fierce Wind dragged the poisoned man back, and the water paranormals condensed a mass of water to clean the poison on his arm. Several people looked at Xiaoqing with unfriendly eyes. Xiaoqing didn't care. She called Gu Panpan and the others to continue cleaning up the camp. Gu Chuan and Gu Panpan found some firewood and prepared to start a fire to cook. Of course, Yan Hanqing was in charge of cooking. On the other side, the members of Fierce Wind's paranormals washed the poisoned man's arm several times. During the first wash, a lot of broken skin tissue flowed down along with the black poison. During the second wash, the color of the water became much clearer. After 5 washes, his arm returned to its normal color. Those people looked at Xiaoqing's team even more unfriendly, especially those who were close to the poison man. It seemed that they all wanted to come over and cause trouble. Xiaoqing and the others didn't care about their reactions at all. They set up the pots and bowls and prepared to cook. To put it bluntly, he was the one who touched the poisoned man's arm. How could he blame them for not stopping him in time? How could there be such a saying in the world? However, as the only 3 level 3 paranormals in the base, Fierce Wind's paranormals had been completely spoiled. They were selfish and arrogant, and they might kill themselves one day. Yan Hanqing's cooking skills were particularly good. While he was cooking, the aroma of the food would spread far and wide. However, Gale did not have someone like Yan Hanqing who had the ability and cooking skills, so they only ate dry rations. Someone said sourly, "Don't worry about attracting zombies. A newbie will always be a newbie." Courage is bigger than the sky but no skills. Cheng Jiao rolled her eyes at him and said, "Stop talking. You talk too much." Lin Xiaofeng's judgment was naturally better than theirs. He said seriously, "Don't underestimate them. Otherwise, you'll be the ones who suffer. What you did today was wrong. Someone was unhappy. They have to take their son with them when they go out. Maybe they're spoiled by someone. Boss, you think too highly of them. Look, they even take a cook with them when they go out on a mission. Such a team of paranormals, how strong can they be?" "That's right. They're just a newbie team, but they have such a bad temper. Those guys in the team all have poker faces, as if they're so powerful. Why can't I see how powerful they are?" Another team member said with disdain. Lin Xiaofeng couldn't help but frown. He was a senior executive before the apocalypse, and he thought that he had the best judgment. However, he couldn't see through Xiaoqing. He couldn't even figure out her temperament. However, Lin Xiaofeng was very clear about one thing. Xiaoqing was definitely a capable person. He could tell from her temperament. Chapter 55. They had to eat lunch every day. Finally, they found a safe place to rest. Xiaoqing got off the car with her people. When they walked inside, a tall man with a crew cut kicked the iron gate. Xiaoqing and the others were startled. especially the unprepared little bun, who went straight into Xiaoqing's arms. Xiaoqing stopped. The temperature in her eyes suddenly dropped. Her long nails popped out in an instant, but before she could do anything, they were caught by Yan Hanqing. Yan Hanqing shook his head at Xiaoqing. After all, it was not the time to turn hostile. Although they were confident that they could wipe out the Gale Squad, there would be casualties on their side. It was not worth it. Xiaoqing suppressed her anger, but her face was still cold. She stood at the door and did not go in. She said in a faint voice, "Captain Lin, why don't we split up?" Lin Xiaofeng's face was also a little ugly. His team members did not listen to him and ran to Xiaoqing's team to show their strength. It would be strange if he was happy. "Captain Xiao, the danger of splitting up is too high. If two teams stay together, in case of any trouble, we can help each other." Lin Xiaofeng tried to salvage the situation. Xiaoqing smiled. "Help? Captain Lin, you must be joking. I'm not being aggressive. If we stay here, I can't guarantee that I won't do anything to your team members. I think your team members think the same. It's best if we split up. It's good for you, good for me, good for everyone." Cheng Jiao saw that the members of the Gale Squad were about to rebel. In order to calm them down, she hurriedly said, "Since Captain Xiao said so, let's split up." Lin Xiaofeng was really embarrassed, but he did not say anything. After a moment of silence, he said, "Anyway, let's talk about it after lunch." Xiaoqing shook her head, turned around and left with Yan Hanqing and the others. When they left, they heard the Gale Squad's unrestrained cheers. "Sister Qing, are you leaving just like that?" Gu Ponpon's eyes widened. She was very indignant. How could such a group of people become a level 3 team? The heavens must be blind. "Why are you staying for dinner instead of leaving?" Xiaoqing glanced at Dai calmly. Dai immediately understood what Xiaoqing meant. After running a little further, he howled. Zombies had their own way of communicating with each other. Dai's shout just now was to gather the nearby zombies. How could he just leave like that? At the very least, he had to give them a small gift so that they could put in more effort. Now, Gu Panpan could only cover her mouth and laugh. Xiaoqing got in the car and led Gu Panpan and the others all the way to the shortest but also the most dangerous road. On the other side, people were celebrating. Each one was more excited than the other. Cheng Jiao came over and said in a low voice, "There's a lot of resentment down there. It's not good to let them hold it all the time. Don't be angry." Lin Xiaofeng didn't say anything. He just sat there alone sulking. He was angry about two things. In fact, he had always noticed that his team members were becoming more and more arrogant. However, there were some things that he couldn't say, so he could only remind them indirectly. However, it was useless so far. They wouldn't change until they suffered losses. Second, the Gale Squad's members almost ignored his words about Xiaoqing's incident, which made him very embarrassed. After all, his authority as a team leader was useless. Not to mention that their team had thoroughly offended Xiaoqing's side this time. While the Gale Squad was discussing when Xiaoqing's team would be wiped out by the zombies, Xiaoqing and the others had found a small supermarket to have lunch. After entering the supermarket, they quickly cleared the zombies in the supermarket and were ready to eat. The supermarkets near the city gates had already been almost emptied out. Gu Panpan, who refused to believe it, searched one more time. She only found a packet of plums, a packet of ham sausages, and a few umbrellas. They had all been cleaned up to the point that they couldn't be any cleaner. "Sister Qing, if we go to the city center, should we find a few big shopping malls and see if there are any supplies that can be moved?" Gu Panpan could not help but ask. Xiaoqing sat on the ground and looked at the road map. The nearest road was said to be the most dangerous one because they would pass by several shopping malls, a high school, and countless residential areas. While looking at the map, Xiaoqing said, "There are too many zombies in those large shopping malls. Ordinary search teams and paranormal squads don't dare to go in. So I think the larger shopping malls near the city center have well-preserved supplies." So Xiaoqing's implication was that they should go there. After all, it was on the way. When they finished searching the shopping malls and arrived at the city center building, the Gale Squad would probably still be on their way. "This time our income will definitely not be small," Gu Panpan vowed. She had already imagined the scene of resources rolling in. "Don't take it lightly. Although ordinary zombies don't dare to attack us, There must be a lot of mutant zombies in such a big city. We still have to be careful in case of a sneak attack. Xiaoqing said without raising her head. The biggest advantage of their squad was that Xiaoqing's instructions and orders would be carried out very well, and there would be no scenes of overt compliance. There was a saying, "Don't be afraid of a godlike opponent, but be afraid of a pig-like teammate." We will remember. Gu Panpan nodded very seriously. They had been with Xiaoqing for so long, so they still had this awareness. Xiaoqing nodded and used a pencil to circle some places where she thought there might be high-level mutant zombies. Although she was not afraid, she didn't want to see any loss, or even one of her team members injured. Naturally, the safer the better. The others sat down to eat. Since they knew that Xiaoqing didn't need to eat, they were used to eating while Xiaoqing watched them eat. Roar! The roar of zombies came from afar. Xiaoqing closed the map and raised her head to look at the direction. She couldn't help but smile. They seemed to be members of the Gale squad. After finishing their meal, they went out and were surrounded by zombies. That pile of zombies was enough to make them suffer. At least they didn't have the energy to plot against Xiaoqing. Chapter 56. After a leisurely meal, the group set off once again. This time without the storm ability user squad. Xiaoqing and the others were free to collect the crystal nuclei. The specific pattern was like this. Air Dai restrained his aura and squatted on the roof of the car, in charge of finishing off the zombies and collecting the crystal nuclei. Gu Panpan was in charge of driving. Every time there were zombies that didn't have eyes, Xiaoqing would let the vines wrap around the zombies and pull them closer. Then, Gu Chuan and Yan Hanqing would use their abilities to get rid of the zombies that couldn't resist. Maintaining this pattern for the whole afternoon, Air Dai collected a plastic bag of crystal stones. When the sky was a little dark, Xiaoqing and the others found a safe place to stop and rest. A group of people cleared the space and came out. They gathered in a circle and began to divide the loot. Most of the crystal stones were put in Xiaoqing's space, leaving some to be absorbed in case of an emergency. The next day, after walking for the whole morning, Xiaoqing and the others arrived at the first zombie-dense place. It was a school. When passing by the gate, they could see zombies in guard uniforms wandering around the school. Roughly estimating, there were at least 1,000 zombies in the school. Don't forget, this was a key high school before the apocalypse. There were more than 2,000 students plus the colonel's staff, nearly 3,000 people. Excluding those who escaped alive, those who were completely eaten, and some zombies who left the school, there were at least 1,000 or 2,000 people left. Xiaoqing looked at the school with envy. How many sparkling crystal stones were there? At present, Yan Hanqing had just become a level 2 paranormal, and the others were in the middle of level 2 and level 3. They needed a lot of energy to fill up. Even she was in the stage of accumulating energy. When the energy was full and couldn't be increased, it would be time for a breakthrough. Right now, ordinary zombie crystal cores were of little use to Xiaoqing. A pile of zombie crystal cores could only provide a small amount of energy. She needed high-level zombie crystal cores. The school was so big and there were so many zombies. There must be a lot of level 2 and level 3 zombies. They were all high-grade crystals. Yan Hanqing looked at Xiaoqing's expressionless but bright eyes. He couldn't help but say, "We are not in a hurry. They will definitely arrive at the city hall much later than us. It doesn't matter even if we arrive a little later." Xiaoqing's bright eyes were like two small light bulbs. Looking at the wandering zombies in the iron gate, it was like looking at sparkling crystals. "Why don't we go in?" Gu Panpan was also very straightforward. "Alright, maybe we can get more high-level crystals. Just pile them up and I'll be able to reach level 3. Xiaoqing fixed the little bun on her back, found a safe place to park the car, and sneaked in with a group of friends. Before going in, Xiaoqing reminded them again and again, "Once you encounter danger, don't fight. Just retreat. We are here to make a fortune. It's not worth it if we get injured or something." Gu Panpan rubbed her hands and said, "Got it, Sister Qing. Where should we start?" "The dormitory building." Xiaoqing considered and then said. They went to the dormitory building. The male and female dormitories were close to each other, and there were a lot of wandering zombies nearby. Ordinary zombies didn't have intelligence. They were dominated by hunger. Zombies couldn't feel full. If there was enough food, they would keep eating. Even if they burst their stomachs, they wouldn't feel full. The higher-level zombies were much smarter. Although they were still dominated by hunger, the higher-level zombies had some judgment ability. The level 3 zombies knew how to fight in ambush. Xiaoqing wasn't interested in these ordinary zombies, but the higher-level zombies were hidden in the crowd. Even if she looked carefully, she couldn't see any difference. Only when she started to fight could she tell which one was the higher level. So they started to clean up the area. Yan Hanqing's electric power was very useful. He was now working hard to train his control, trying to use the least amount of power to paralyze the zombies. Then, Gu Panpan would be responsible for killing the zombies when they were paralyzed. This kind of cooperation saved a lot of energy and physical strength. After all, there was a limit to one's power. If it was used up, it would be used up. They had to wait for it to recover before they could use it again. Yan Hanqing was only level 2, so how many power could he have? This was the same principle as a poor person calculating how to spend money. Every coin must be used on the blade. Here, they were in groups of 2 hunting zombies not far away. Once they found a higher-level zombie, they would call their friends over and kill it. At this time, Xiaotong played a huge role. Although she usually didn't talk and just ate or played with Little Bun, she was actually training her spiritual power all the time, especially her ability to control her spiritual power. Every time they found a higher-level zombie, Xiaotong was responsible for holding up a spiritual shield and bouncing the surrounding zombies away, leaving only the higher-level zombies. Then the other friends would focus fire together. Couldn't be better. Chapter 57. Their teamwork was getting better and better. Some were in charge of controlling the zombies, some were in charge of attacking, and Xiaotong could be said to be an absolute defense for a short period of time. Their close-range and long-range attacks were absolutely perfect. After counting the crystal stones, Xiaoqing was very satisfied. Ignoring the ordinary zombie nuclei, there were dozens of level 2 and above ones. The dormitory building was almost cleaned up, and the majority was in the teaching building. After cleaning up the teaching building, Xiaoqing might have more than 100 high-level zombie nuclei in his hands. Of course, among these 100 nuclei, most of them were level 2 zombie nuclei, but even so, it was definitely a big fortune. With an excited mood, Xiaoqing and the others went all the way to the teaching building. There were obviously a lot more zombies in the teaching building, and the density was at least twice as high as in the dormitory building. Xiaoqing and the others also encountered 2 rare spiritual-type zombies. When they arrived here, it could be seen that zombies were generally physically strong, but spiritual-type zombies were not far from being mentally retarded. Therefore, spiritual-type zombies were simply too rare. Spiritual-type zombies were generally weaker in terms of physical strength. Just like the big-headed baby zombie from last time, it was attached to a big, strong zombie. This was also a kind of cooperation and coexistence. The 2 spiritual-type zombies that Xiaoqing and the others encountered had their own small groups. They were relatively difficult to deal with, but they were still killed by Xiaoqing and the others. The 2 crystal stones naturally fell into Xiaotong's hands. The feeling of hunting zombies in such a dense place was like stealing vegetables from someone's farm. That feeling could not be described with just one word. Especially when there were more and more crystal stones in his pocket. There was a feeling of becoming a winner in life. After cleaning up the first and second floors, Xiaoqing did not prepare to take his companions to the 3rd floor. Everyone's abilities were almost used up. If they went up again, it would be bad if they encountered any danger and some of his companions got hurt. People should not be too greedy. They should know when to stop. However, those who were not content were like snakes trying to swallow an elephant. They would all end up being stuffed to death. They went down the teaching building, but before they reached the flag position, there was a sudden scream accompanied by Xiaotong's spiritual power shield. The vines were like a group of wandering snakes, quickly extending in all directions. Xiaoqing fixed her eyes and saw a zombie in dirty professional clothes climbing up from the ground. It only had half of its head, and the other half had been cut off diagonally by something unknown. A part of its skull had been cut off, and one could still see its slightly wriggling brain. However, this wriggling wasn't because its brain was still alive. Instead, it was because there were maggots crawling around inside, making it look like the brain was wriggling. The zombie's rotten face was covered with a pair of broken glasses. It was hard to tell how the glasses had survived until now. It seemed like this zombie was a teacher when she was alive, but now she was just a zombie. What level is it? Gu Panpan couldn't help asking. Xiaoqing frowned and controlled the vines to swing at the zombie like a whip. The female zombie grabbed the vine whip and pulled it crazily, breaking the vines. After testing, Xiaoqing's face was a little pale. It's at a higher level than me. Now we are all exhausted and don't have much power left. It's not suitable for us to fight with it. Let's go. Xiaotong immediately held up the shield, and the group quickly withdrew. The female zombie was faster. Like a cannonball, it hit the shield. Although it was bounced back, Xiaotong snorted and fell into Xiaoqing's arms. The level gap between Xiaotong and this zombie was too big. She couldn't stop it at all. I'll cover you. You take Xiaotong out first. Xiaoqing said calmly. Under her command, the vines danced wildly as if they were alive, preventing the female zombie from approaching. No, you want to stop it alone? Don't you want to live? Gu Panpan widened his eyes and said angrily, We'll go together. Guchuan, take her away. Qing, I'll cover you. Yan Hanqing tried. His ability didn't do much damage to the female zombie, but it was still possible to make her stiff for a moment. It shouldn't be a problem for him and Xiaoqing to stop the female zombie for a while. Why are you fighting? Guchuan was very calm. Erdai must stay. There are zombies outside. If we go out, we will be attacked. It's better to stay and fight. Let Erdai take Xiaotong to the car first. But would Erdai leave? He wouldn't leave Xiaoqing behind. Everyone knew this clearly. Xiaoqing had made them so angry that they were about to die. Why was it that each of them was more disobedient than the other? Stay here and drag. Before Xiaoqing could finish her words, the female zombie had already broken through the defensive line formed by the vines and rushed over at lightning speed. Chapter 58. The strange thing was that the zombie didn't pounce on Xiaoqing or Yan Hanqing first. Instead, it pounced on Gu Panpan, who was standing aside. Gu Panpan was still using her superpower. Seeing this, she was startled and subconsciously punched out. However, it was Gu Panpan who was sent flying. When she activated her special ability, her body's toughness was very high, but she was still sent flying and broke the pillar at the entrance of the teaching building. Xiaoqing was really frightened. Her vines wrapped the female zombie into a cocoon in an instant. Guchuan ran over to check on Gu Panpan. Fortunately, Gu Panpan was a tough woman. She coughed up some blood and climbed out of the ruins. She wiped the corners of her mouth and said, Damn it, it almost flattened my chest. Guchuan, who was worried about her and ran over, was speechless. High speed, high defense, and high strength. Xiaoqing felt that the big cocoon made of vines was constantly being hit. She quickly calculated the fighting power of the female zombie and said, No, if we were in our heyday, we might be able to fight it. But now we can't beat it. It's not easy to retreat. Yan Hanqing looked at it worriedly. Then he saw that the green cocoon suddenly exploded. These vines were formed by Xiaoqing's superpower. Once they were destroyed, Xiaoqing would also be implicated. She felt a tightness in her chest and a taste of blood rose to her throat. However, the female zombie who broke out of the cage turned around and rushed to Gu Panpan. As soon as Gu Panpan climbed out, she screamed, Oh my God, did I offend her? Why is she coming to me again? Then Gu Panpan was sent flying for the second time. This time, she directly broke the glass door of the teaching building and flew into the teaching building. The female zombie didn't even look at Xiaoqing and the others. It seemed that she was determined to kill Gu Panpan and chased after her. Yan Hanqing suddenly had an idea. Just now, Gu Panpan killed the most zombies, right? Xiaoqing thought about it and nodded. Although she and Yan Hanqing had used vines to control most of the zombies, and Yan Hanqing had used lightning to paralyze most of the zombies, the one who had killed the most was Gu Panpan. Erdai and Guchuan couldn't catch up with Gu Panpan, whose eyes were full of zombie nuclei. Xiaoqing instantly understood. You mean, well, I think that a level 4 zombie is very likely to retain a certain level of consciousness. It was a teacher when it was alive. Maybe it was a very responsible teacher. It didn't leave the school when it reached level 4. It is very likely. Yin Hanqing frowned and analyzed. Xiaoqing immediately continued, you mean it is protecting the students who have become zombies in the school? So it is crazily attacking Gu Panpan just because Gu Panpan killed a lot of zombies? Yin Hanqing nodded. Xiaoqing also felt that this answer was very reliable, so she nodded. I think it is very likely. Let's give it a try. Gu Panpan already wanted to cry. She didn't understand why the female zombie liked her. It was as if she had stolen its man. She didn't want to let go. Just when Gu Panpan tried to get rid of the zombie many times but to no avail, the zombie suddenly roared outside. The female zombie was originally chasing Gu Panpan happily, but it immediately gave up on Gu Panpan, turned around and ran outside. Gu Panpan was dumbfounded. Just a moment ago it looked like it wanted to die with her. Now it fell in love with someone else? The female zombie directly jumped down from the second-floor window. With an angry roar it rushed towards Yin Hanqing, who was killing the zombies. Yin Hanqing didn't want to fight. He ran towards the gate while constantly releasing lightning to kill the zombies on the way. Chapter 59. Sure enough, the female zombie was mad. She roared and followed them. At this time, Gu Chuan had already left the battlefield with Xiao Tong and Xiao Bao. Air Dai mixed in with a group of zombies and quietly approached the female zombie. When Yin Hanqing was infinitely close to the door, and the female zombie was infinitely close to Yin Hanqing, a huge flower head suddenly drilled out of the ground. The position of the flower was very clever. The place where it drilled out was right under the female zombie's feet. Without saying anything, it opened its petals and swallowed the female zombie. The corrosive venom in the flower's petals immediately poured on the female zombie, as if it didn't cost money. The female zombie was roaring because of the corrosion. Yin Hanqing turned his head and gave it a lightning, paralyzing the struggling female zombie. Xiaoqing didn't stay idle. After she finished with the female zombie, she controlled the man-eating flower to secrete digestive fluid. She also knew that the man-eating flower certainly couldn't digest the female zombie, but before it struggled out, half of its body's bones and flesh were completely destroyed, which was still possible. Feeling that the female zombie inside had begun to struggle violently, and when the man-eating flower couldn't hold on any longer, Xiaoqing controlled the man-eating flower to open its mouth and spit out the female zombie. The female zombie looked even more terrible now. Its body was covered with a strong corrosive liquid, and there was a burning smell accompanied by smoke. The clothes on the surface of its body were almost corroded, revealing the slightly rotten body underneath. At this moment there were white bones everywhere. When it moved, pieces of flesh would fall down. At this time the female zombie was in a state of madness. As soon as it was free, it roared and rushed to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing waved the vine in her hand like a steel whip. The barbs on the vine all stood up, shining with a cold light. She didn't aim at the female zombie, but at the surrounding zombies who were attracted by the sound. She was very clear that if this whip hit the female zombie, it would at most make her lose a few pieces of flesh and break a bone. It wouldn't leave any fatal injuries. But if it hit the ordinary zombies, it would definitely result in several deaths. As Xiaoqing expected, the female zombie gave up on her and turned to the vine whip. It seemed that it was trying to destroy the vine whip of the students who wanted to hurt it. The female zombie was very fast. It successfully caught the vine whip a second before it fell on the zombies. Before it could destroy it, Air Dai suddenly jumped out from the group of zombies. It didn't care about the corrosive venom on its body, and hugged the female zombie. The female zombie was obviously a little confused. Its limited intelligence didn't let it know what its student wanted to do, but its body reaction was to break free. But it couldn't because the vine whip in its hand, it suddenly softened and wrapped around its body like a rope. At the same time, Air Dai's sharp nails pierced through the female zombie's eyes and directly into its brain. When it was screaming in pain, Air Dye had already grabbed its head and crushed it like half of a smashed watermelon. High-level zombies had strong recovery ability. As long as their heads were still there, they wouldn't die. Although low-level zombies didn't have recovery ability, they could still bite people when their bodies were broken into many pieces. But no matter high-level or low-level zombies, once their heads were crushed, they would really die. Xiaoqing couldn't help but sigh in relief, but her heart was unspeakably complicated. A zombie, full of obsession to protect its students, but what about human beings? Chapter 60. Xiaoqing felt that the reason why this zombie could evolve to level 4 at this time was not because of anything else, but because it had an obsession in its heart, and those obsessions were its students. The strong desire to protect was probably the driving force for it to evolve to level 4. Just like Xiaoqing, it was Little Bun who supported her, and now it was Air Dye and the others. Now Xiaoqing suddenly felt very lucky. Although she and her son had become neither human nor ghost, if that thing didn't happen, that scumbag might do something else in the future. It was very possible that he would work with the mistress to poison her and her son, and then help the mistress get promoted. Unfortunately, it was also fortunate. At least now she had seen through his character, and could still live peacefully with her son, which was a great fortune in the midst of misfortune. Air Dye was holding the crystal. His cheeks were still stained with dirty blood, and there were corroded wounds on his body, but he happily ran over and handed the crystal to Xiaoqing. His pupils were very dark, but the color was very beautiful. Especially when he looked at Xiaoqing with sparkling eyes, it always made Xiaoqing want to touch his hair. Xiaoqing finally couldn't hold back and rubbed Air Dye's hair, and then said softly, "Let's go see how Gu Panpan is doing. Let's leave this place first. There are too many zombies here. Who knows, maybe another level 4 or 5 zombie will jump out." Yin Hanqing went to see Gu Panpan. Gu Panpan was indeed a tough man, and when he came out, he was still very lively. After the group of people gathered, they left the school. Now almost everyone was injured. After returning to the car, Xiaoqing put the crystal in front of everyone. The level 4 zombie crystal was as big as a pigeon's egg. It looked like a piece of crystal, especially when the sun shined on it. The light it reflected was particularly gorgeous. It was hard to imagine that this was something taken out from the corpse of a walking corpse. Everyone knows that zombie crystal nuclei don't have any attributes, except for some special ones. In other words, this crystal can be absorbed by all of us here. Now we need to discuss how to distribute it. Xiaoqing said seriously. There was a saying, even blood brothers have to settle accounts clearly. They looked at each other, and Gu Panpan said first, "I think we should give it to Sister Qing. First, Sister Qing is the strongest among us. If we give this crystal to her, she will become stronger, and we will be safer when we go out for missions. Even in the base, she will have more say. Second, when we killed that zombie, Sister Qing contributed the most, so she should take it. Last but not least, I like Sister Qing. If I also have a share of this crystal, I am willing to give it to Sister Qing." Gu Chuan said lightly, "I second that." Gu Panpan immediately said with a wretched face, "Brother, which part do you second?" "I like Sister Qing." Gu Chuan turned his head expressionlessly. "What are you talking about? We are discussing something serious." The few of them still managed to see his slightly flushed earlobes and the side of his face. Gu Panpan hit to the side and snickered. Yin Hanqing and the others didn't even need to ask about their thoughts. Xiaoqing didn't pretend to be pretentious. She just took out all the crystals she got today and gave everyone a share. She didn't take a single one, only the level 4 one. "You guys are the ones who suffer losses. If we get something suitable for you in the future, I will give you back." "Okay." Gu Panpan put away his share. They all knew that if he didn't take it, Xiaoqing wouldn't take the level 4 one either. After dividing the loot, they returned to their respective cars. Those who needed to apply medicine did so, and those who needed to change their clothes changed their clothes. Then they packed up and continued to move forward. In fact, even if they went back to the base now, this trip's harvest was enough. But they still had a mission, so they couldn't give up halfway. But this time they didn't run to the place where the zombies were densely packed. Instead, they went to their destination. After all, adventuring once was enough. If Xiaoqing was alone, she would definitely go everywhere, but now she had a group of friends. Even if she wanted to take risks, she had to consider her friends. She couldn't gamble with the lives of her friends, so safety was the first priority. The city was too big and the road was full of zombies, so they walked slowly. When they arrived at the city hall, it was already the afternoon of the next day. Looking at the traces, the Gale squad hadn't arrived yet. Xiaoqing immediately made a decision. We won't go in tonight. Let's stay outside for a night and see if that group of people is coming. A school is so dangerous, the city hall is definitely not simple. Of course, everyone agreed. They found a safe place where they could see the entrance of the city hall and prepared to eat and sleep. Of course, the night watch was Xiaoqing and Air Dai. Little Baozi couldn't sleep either, so he rolled around in Xiaoqing's arms. Little Baozi ate a lot, such as crystal stones and some nutritious food. He could kill Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan in one meal, and he didn't stop eating. Usually when he walked on the road, he would hold a crystal stone. However, he didn't grow. Little Baozi looked the same as when he came out of Xiaoqing's belly. He didn't grow at all, except that his little face was a little chubbier. This made Xiaoqing very distressed. Before, she was glad that little Baozi was 3 heads tall when he came out of her belly, which was much easier to take care of than a baby. Now, she was worried that little Baozi's body was damaged because of the car accident and other reasons. Otherwise, why didn't he grow? However, Xiaoqing was distressed for a while. After all, it was her first time raising a baby, so she didn't have much experience. She thought that maybe the baby was so slow at the beginning. They spent the whole night with Little Bun and Dumbo competing to see who was cuter. The next day, when they got up and had a full meal, they saw the members of the Gale superpower team coming in late. Moreover, quite a few of them had injuries on their bodies. They looked a little battered. The few friends who didn't like the Gale squad saw this scene and were very happy in an instant. We are happy to see that you are not doing well. Sitting next to Xiaoqing, he asked curiously, "Do you bring cooking utensils, oil, salt, sauce, and vinegar with you when you go out? A few people in my team are all foodies. My son is growing up, so when we go out on a mission we have to bring cooking utensils and ingredients," Xiaoqing said calmly. Lin Xiaofeng was a little speechless. He didn't know what to say, but he was quite clear about one thing. Xiaoqing was definitely hiding her strength. Every time a paranormal team went out on a mission, their heads were hanging on their necks. It was not easy to go back alive. Who would care about food and drinks? Only those who were more relaxed and confident dared to bring cooking utensils, and vinegar. What's more, didn't the fact that they arrived at the entrance of the city hall earlier than them prove their strength? He was afraid that the team members would think that Xiaoqing and the others came here by luck. They would rather die than believe that they were strong. Lin Xiaofeng really didn't want to be enemies with Xiaoqing and the others. Ha! How can you say that? Before one of the Gale paranormals could finish his words, Chang Jiao stuffed his mouth with a steamed bun. You can't even shut your mouth with rice. Do you want to use a knife? The other team members were also silent. They were already embarrassed to talk. How could they have the nerve to say that when they were eating other people's food? Lin Xiaofeng was a little embarrassed. In fact, they don't mean any harm. They just don't think before they speak. Xiaoqing smiled. It's okay. People like them are more straightforward. Who would argue with cannon fodder? Bickering with cannon fodder was the same as bickering with dead people. She felt that she was quite generous, so she was ready to forgive them. When the Gale paranormals were full, Xiaoqing considerately brought some bandages and the like over. Change your bandages. There will be a fierce battle when we enter the city hall later. Lin Xiaofeng thanked her and then distributed the bandages. Chang Jiao took the bandages and changed them for him. The cloth on Lin Xiaofeng's arm had been stained red, and the outside was still dirty. Chang Jiao wrapped the cloth around the wound, revealing the blackened wound underneath. The wound was still bleeding with pus. It was obvious that it had been poisoned. The recovery ability of paranormals was much stronger than that of ordinary people. If it weren't for the poison, Lin Xiaofeng's wound would have started to scab. Xiaoqing still had a lot of medicine in her hand, but she didn't want to give it to Lin Xiaofeng, nor did she want to help Li Xiaofeng. She just watched Cheng Jiao wash Lin Xiaofeng's wound with water, then asked, "Did you cut off the rotten flesh around the wound? It's not good for healing." Cheng Jiao shook her head. "It's useless. I cut it off when I was poisoned." At that time the red flesh was exposed, but it didn't take long for it to become like this. Cheng Jiao washed Lin Xiaofeng's wound with water many times. Then she took out a dagger and cut off the rotten flesh. Just as she said, the red flesh was exposed, and the blood that flowed out also turned red. Cheng Jiao poured some powder to stop bleeding and bandaged Lin Xiaofeng's wound. After that, Cheng Jiao became more and more worried. Xiaoqing looked at the situation and asked, "Why don't we rest for another day? We'll go to the city hall tomorrow to take a look." Chapter 62. Lin Xiaofeng felt that Xiaoqing had accommodated them enough. She had waited for so long and provided food and bandages. No matter what the reason was, she had given them enough face. If they continued to put on airs and put on airs, this enmity would be set in stone. So Lin Xiaofeng immediately said, "In fact, they are all minor injuries. But for safety reasons, we should rest for a while before going in to investigate." Xiaoqing nodded and said, "We have already set up the tents. You can sleep for a while and rest up. We will go in to investigate together." Lin Xiaofeng was embarrassed and quickly ordered his team members to set up the tents. His team members were dragging their feet. They were probably still thinking about how troublesome it was to set up the tents themselves. Xiaoqing led some people to help them set up the tents. Then they went to their own places to rest. They were indeed resting. Xiaoqing's side was quite energetic. They were lying down and chatting. Xiaoqing was very calm and said to everyone, especially Xiao Tong, who was relatively weak, "At the critical moment, don't show any mercy. Just hide behind them. If there is no danger, then it's fine. If there is a problem, I hope we can all get out of this city. As for them, don't save them and don't care." No one thought that Xiaoqing was cold. Wasn't this the end of the world? If it was a team with good character, maybe they would help them. For this kind of thing, they could die wherever they wanted. No one cared. The team members all expressed that they would remember. When it was almost noon, both sides had rested enough. Yan Hanqing made a lot of portable food and distributed it. After all, they were in the building at noon, so there was certainly no place to cook. "It's almost time. Let's go in." Lin Xiaofeng glanced at the towering city hall and said, "If there was no problem, they should be able to come out before nightfall. If there was an accident, they could find an empty room to stay temporarily and leave someone to keep watch." After the two sides discussed, Xiaoqing's team was the one to lead the way. Originally, Lin Xiaofeng wanted them to lead the way. After all, the pressure of leading the way was relatively high. They owed a lot of favors to Xiaoqing's team, so it was natural for them to lead the way. However, his team members were not willing to do so. They were all saying that they were the ones who led the way the last time. Why should they do the same this time? It was time for Xiaoqing to lead the way. Xiaoqing gave Lin Xiaofeng, who was stuck in the middle, a way out. "Your team members are right. After all, you guys were the ones who opened the path last time. This time it's our turn. Moreover, your team members are all injured. It's better for you guys to bring up the rear and conserve your energy." Lin Xiaofeng was more grateful to Xiaoqing. After all, Xiaoqing had been giving him face along the way. Compared to his team members who didn't even take the captain's words to heart, he had nothing to say. Lin Xiaofeng had made a decision. This time, when he returned to the base, he must change his team members. At least he had to change some of them who were not blind so that they would not offend people and make enemies for him everywhere. The formation of Xiaoqing's team was as follows. Xiaoqing and her son were in the middle, Air Dai was on the left, Xiao Tong was on the right, and Gu Panpan was in charge of leading the way. Gu Chuan and Yan Hanqing were in charge of assisting. In order not to let Gale's team discover the problem, Xiaoqing told Air Dai to keep a low profile. She didn't want to scare the zombies and make them not dare to come out. All the way up, Xiaoqing's team members almost didn't make a move. Only Gu Ponpon's team members in the front moved. Lin Xiaofeng, who was at the back, couldn't help but frown. It was obvious that Gu Panpan was a strength-type ability user. This was especially obvious but not rare. Gu Chuan's ability was rarer. The ice element was a variant. Among the thousands of water-type ability users, who knew if there was even a palm-sized number of ice-type ability users? If Gu Chuan's superpower was rare, then Yan Hanqing's superpower was rare. At present, the number of lightning superpowered people was pitifully small. Yan Hanqing might be the third lightning superpowered person to be registered. The third one didn't mean that there were 2 lightning superpowered people in their base. It meant that there were registered lightning superpowered people in all the survivor bases in the country. That was how rare they were. The movements of the 3 people who opened the way were very simple. They didn't make any fancy moves. As soon as the zombies came out, either Gu Chuan would freeze them or Yan Hanqing would use lightning. The zombies that couldn't move were easily dealt with by Gu Panpan. It's nothing. A member of Gale's team muttered. They're all so arrogant. I thought they were very powerful. Lin Xiaofeng was so angry that he didn't want to talk. His team members didn't have eyes, did they? They didn't even have brains. Why didn't they think about it? They were also opening the way, but they were flying in front with all kinds of superpowers. It looked very powerful, but they wasted so many superpowers. Their speed was not as fast as Xiaoqing's team. This team member had to be changed. He must have been blind to have brought such a group of idiots into his team of ability users. Cheng Jiao and Lin Xiaofeng were childhood sweethearts, so Cheng Jiao could tell what Lin Xiaofeng was thinking. She patted Lin Xiaofeng's shoulder and said, "Brother Feng, don't be too angry. We've been on missions together for so long. Don't you know what kind of people they are? They like to take advantage of you, but deep down they still trust you." Lin Xiaofeng didn't say anything, but he had already made up his mind. Xiaoqing's team was indeed very efficient. It only took them a few minutes to go from the first floor to the second floor. The mission description was very clear that the information was stored in the reference room on the 6th floor. That was to say they didn't need to go to the top floor. They just needed to go to the reference room on the 6th floor. The City Hall building was quite empty. After all, most of the people inside were staff and leaders. When the army came to rescue, the City Hall building was the first to be rescued. At the beginning of the apocalypse, the City Hall building had been cleaned up by the rescue army. The remaining zombies were the survivors at that time, and the outsiders who came later. The difficulty of this mission was that they had to go deep into the zombie-occupied city. That was why the reward was so high. Xiaoqing's team went all the way to the 4th floor. They didn't encounter any big trouble, so many people couldn't help but feel a little relaxed. Especially the Gale Paranormal team, who was responsible for bringing up the rear. They could be said to have walked leisurely all the way up. They didn't even move their hands. No wonder they let their guard down. But the fact told them that if they let their guard down in this kind of situation, they would often lose their lives. Xiaoqing's team was about to go to the 5th floor when a scream came from behind. Xiaoqing looked back and saw a corpse with half of its neck torn open on the ground. The Gale Paranormal team didn't even see the murderer. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.